In the midst of a crowd of hungry monsters and clouds of dust, a boy is visible. His cloak flutters in the wind, and he stands firm and fearless, as if he does not notice the sinister creatures at all. This boy is an alchemist. He possesses a technique that combines several things into something entirely new, and thanks to it, he can use a spatial storage. Knowing that alchemy will solve any problem, the boy with a confident expression takes several magical swords from the storage without a doubt. They were created by alchemy. Waving his staff rays shone around, a dozen swords emerged and in an instant destroyed the threat. This boy is not ordinary. He is a genius, a alchemist vacant ord. The system completely shuts down, and at the same moment the capsule door opens. Powerful gusts of wind and clouds of dust rush in all directions. When the capsule fully opened, Vakenord carefully crawled out of it, holding onto the edge of the structure, first cautiously pulling out one leg and looking around in surprise. The boy, surrounded by unfamiliar landscapes, slowly turned around, carefully looking at everything around. He tried to understand where he was, but to his surprise, everything around seemed strange and unfamiliar. Around him only ruins, a pile of stones, long overgrown with greenery. Once there stood a beautiful building, and now only a memory of its former grandeur. Vakenord faced a severe illness, and although he fought with all his might, it slowly and relentlessly destroyed his former body, which was once full of strength and health. A brilliant idea came to his mind, and he, as an experiment, entered the cradle of rebirth to cure his illness, but because of this he fell into a coma and slept for a very long time. The boy broke down into a wave of joy and admiration. He trembled from an incredible overload of emotions when he realized that all his efforts had paid off. He was still alive, and this brought him unspeakable happiness. Bacon threw back his head and confidently filled his lungs with air. Taking a deep breath, he felt that his memory remained with him, and the illness that tormented him had receded, and there were no more coughing attacks. He smiled sarcastically, recalling the exclamations and anxiety of those to whom he had told about his idea. "See, my experiment succeeded," the alchemist chuckled. The hero suddenly turned around, noticed his reflection in the mirror, and was overwhelmed with surprise at what he saw. The unexpected sight made him freeze and carefully study his image. The body had impressively rejuvenated, as if he was 20 again, restoring all the freshness and energy that were characteristic of his youth. This was by no means sad news. Memories of the past remained with him, and inside he was still over 40. Vaken, feeling a surge of joy and smiling broadly, decisively announced that he would continue his deep research in alchemy, which he so passionately loved. But there was still one more equally important question. What had happened, and why was the laboratory in such a state? Snapping his fingers, the alchemist ordered to start the test. The boy wanted explanations from Zosmos. In the silence, Bacon's demand to his faithful assistant rang out. A small light, like a bright star, suddenly descended from the very sky, emitting a dazzling glow. Zosmos' answer sounded in the air. He is a fairy, artificially created by Vaken. The boy happily greeted his friend. It seemed they had not seen each other for a very long time. Zosmos responded only to the master's request, and the check was completed. 501 years and 17 days had passed. Vaken, not believing what he heard, asked again. Fear gripped him. He exclaimed, "It can't be. 21 years. Horror echoed in his voice. He could not comprehend how such a thing could have happened. He raised his hands and asked in surprise if he had really slept for so long, to which he was told that the alchemist had slept for 521 years in the cradle of rebirth. But what happened to the laboratory? Where is everyone? What happened to the Morty's dynasty? There were many questions, but unfortunately, no answers appeared. The archives needed to be checked because Zosmos was in sleep mode. After checking the archives, the assistant said that nothing remained. The hero even shouted in surprise. How could this have happened? The Mudrec no longer worked, so the data from the archive could be inaccurate. The hero, in despair, wondered war or disaster. He needed to calm down, and Zosmos advised him to write everything down. The hero sat down and began to write down everything that had just happened, everything he knew about his rebirth and how long he had slept. Calming down a bit and exhaling, Vakenord realized this was actually a very interesting situation. And indeed, for an alchemist, all this was incredibly interesting, and he even became fascinated. He did not just revive, he found himself in another time. The hero and the fairy blossomed with joy. This was a success. So much time had passed, alchemy had advanced and probably reached unprecedented heights, and the alchemist savored what had happened because so much new and exciting awaited him ahead. As a researcher, he eagerly wanted to look into the amazing future. Now it was a completely different era. Filled with joy and excitement, he clearly imagined how different cities looked today, how the figures of people filling the streets change around him, and how the streets themselves transformed under the influence of time and new trends. It was impossible to be sure that the future had changed so much, so the hero decided to check it personally and ordered the fairy to teleport him to the nearest city. Opening his eyes, Vacant was already standing on a ledge from which the whole city was visible, a completely ordinary city. Looking around the streets, the hero froze, confused. How could this have happened? Zosimo's together with his master looked around, swiftly flying over the rooftops of houses. Vakin, looking around confusedly, could not believe that 500 years had passed, and the surrounding world had hardly changed. He had always imagined a completely different future, but reality turned out to be different. After some time, his assistant managed to extract some information from the archive. Even crumbs of information were now priceless to them. Finally, they found themselves in a part of the country called the Kingdom of Juri, in the city of Sauvan itself. The country is already 200 years old, and it is ruled by a king together with the aristocracy, a classic monarchy, Zosim said. But most importantly, there is not a word about alchemists here. As if they never lived or worked, they were completely erased from history. With an empty gaze and seeming calm, but with a noticeable shadow of sadness and disappointment, he sighed, as if trying to release all accumulated emotions and inner experiences. The alchemist exclaimed indignantly, "This simply cannot be. It is impossible to believe, even despite the fairy's dissatisfaction. Alchemy is capable of solving the most diverse problems of humanity. It is extremely important for humans. It is applied in various fields. It simply cannot cease to exist." The hero waved off the fairy's remarks and explained that one should not rely solely on archives. Everything must be checked independently, and Zosimo's could only justify himself by saying that the Tower of the Sage is controlled by someone strange. Vakin walked the city streets and looked around with interest, around familiar houses, passers-by, and usual scenes of everyday life, but no matter how hard he tried, nothing could attract his gaze or hold his attention. He finally reached the market, which was bustling with bright colors and pleasant aromas. Fresh vegetables, fruits, and various baked goods lay on the stalls, and people walked back and forth, each immersed in their own thoughts and affairs, discussing goods, choosing the best, or simply enjoying the atmosphere of these places. Suddenly, Bacon grabbed his stomach. He was growling from hunger. It was very uncomfortable and even a little painful, and the alchemist, absorbed in his affairs, only now realized that he had not eaten or drunk for 500 years. He urgently needs to find money for food, but after 521 years, prices have changed so much that it is hard even to imagine how much he needs. Vakin turned at the sound of the merchant's voice, who unexpectedly addressed him. The young man in the dark cloak tightly held a small bottle with a shiny potion in his hands, convinced that it was a healing elixir that could restore health and strength. Besides, he had an antidote. Not hiding his joy, Bacon rushed to the cellar and immediately bombarded with questions, whether he himself brewed this potion and whether he was an alchemist. Hearing the affirmative answer, he snatched the bottle from the young man in the cloak's hands. The alchemist stared intently and attentively at the vessel and its contents, as if conducting a deep analysis, trying to understand the composition, taste, and aroma of the liquid inside, without even opening it. The joy instantly turned into disappointment. Instead of a potion, just trash, collected from the cheapest ingredients that could be found. The hero frowned. If he had done something so terrible, he would have forced himself to redo it 100 times. Although, perhaps this merchant simply had a very small profit. His stomach betrayed him with a loud rumble. Bacon had a lot of questions, but now he was more worried about something else. The merchant advised him to go to the tavern across the street. Above the door of this tavern hung a beautiful wooden figure of a duck as if in flight, wings widely spread, and nearby a sign, "Dancing Duck." With curiosity and slight surprise, examining the appearance of this simple but quite beautiful building, the hungry alchemist could not help but smile at how such a modest structure could evoke such pleasant feelings. The hero and his assistant agreed. This tavern was impressive, from the majestic wooden figurine all the way to the very roof. However, Zosimus raised a rather important issue: lack of money, but Bacon calmly decided that it was not a problem. Of course, he was an alchemist. His skills would easily cover all expenses, and if he had to wash dishes, he would simply create a special machine for that. Pressing the bell to call a worker, the hero thought to himself, "The owner of this tavern must be a good person, just need to explain everything, and he will immediately understand." Suddenly, a silhouette of a girl appeared behind the boy. Her question interrupted his thoughts. The stranger wanted to know who this person was that had come here. When the girl came closer, her sad face was visible, arms crossed over her chest, and her light wavy hair neatly tied with a scarf. She said with sadness that the tavern was closed and asked them to leave. The alchemist and his assistant instantly panicked. It seemed they were not expected here at all. The desire to eat prevailed. He wanted to explain himself to the girl, but her apology interrupted him. The girl's eyes became glassy from tears rolling down her face. Her father was bedridden with a terrible illness, and she alone could not manage the tavern. Waken, hearing this, did not hesitate to seize the chance. Introducing himself as an alchemist, he offered his help. While the girl was still frozen with surprise, the alchemist and the fairy were already enthusiastically discussing such a wonderful opportunity to pay for the room with medical assistance, but it seemed her surprise turned into anger. Interrupting their hasty thoughts, she sharply swung her hand and struck the attacker in the face with all her might. A loud blow echoed throughout the house. Unable to hold back tears, the blonde confessed that she would never trust an alchemist again because her father fell ill after drinking vitamins made by an alchemist. Bacon could not contain his surprise. He eagerly wanted to help the tavern owner and began to beg his daughter to let him in, but she was categorical. The hero did not back down. He was ready to offer his help even for free, but the girl did not yield to his persuasion. Can one believe such sweet words? When the girl calmed down a bit and gathered her thoughts, she decided to ask him a question that interested her. Looking at him with curiosity, she asked why he was so persistently trying to help her father. Zosim took everything into his own hands and, while saying that they liked the tavern and that at first glance it was clear the owner was a very good person, his mentor only nodded approvingly. The girl began to doubt. Wacken's assistant assured the girl that the alchemist was a true master and immediately asked her to introduce herself. Her name was Fiora. She worked as a waitress in this tavern. Zosimus also introduced himself and announced that he was an artificial fairy created by his master, who had invested his knowledge into him. When he wanted to introduce his master, he simply walked past as if he had already switched to alchemist mode and was fully focused on the problem. The assistant loudly introduced his lord as Vacant Ord, although he was already entering the room, and a sick man was following the girl. In the corner of a cozy, well-furnished room stood a bed, and in it a sick man. He was neatly covered and did not move at all, as if he was already in another world. The alchemist approached closer and saw a simply terrible sight. The man was decomposing alive, his face covered with disgusting ulcers, and the skin seemed to be peeling off the canvas of his face. Bacon immediately understood. This was not just poisoning by a potion, it was much worse. Poisonous decay inside the body forced him to literally rot from the inside. This condition was simply terrible and deeply disgusting. The daughter, unable to hold back tears, told him that her father fell into a coma yesterday, and since then the room was immediately filled with a disgusting stench. The situation turned out to be much worse than the alchemist had imagined. This is simply outrageous. Some incompetent, even irresponsible alchemist caused this. They not only sell poor-quality goods, but their treatment methods only make everything worse. This will never be forgiven, and that is why Vacant was overwhelmed with terrible anger. This situation shocked him and stirred a real storm of emotions in his heart. With determination to change everything, he raised his hand, and at that moment it was enveloped in a soft, pleasant light that radiated warmth. The boy, confident in himself and his strength, resolutely focused, and got to work. It was time to show everyone around his true potential and talents. Without taking his hands off his creation, he ordered Param to figure out what had brought the patient to such a state. He waved his hand, drawing a strange symbol in the air with light, and at the same time persistently urged his assistant A. Within a minute, an alchemical cauldron appeared in the room. Inside, it creates a small space where conceptual information of various substances can be synthesized and replaced. Meanwhile, Zosmos found out. It was all due to improperly prepared potion for fatigue and endurance recovery. Bacon was boiling with rage. It was precisely because of this that the poisoning occurred. Any amateur in alchemy knows how to avoid this. The worried girl turned to the alchemist, not knowing if her father would be okay, but the alchemist seemed to ignore her words. He was completely immersed in his work. He continued drawing signs in the air, but now with both hands. The movements became clear and confident. It was evident that he knew exactly what he was doing. The boy was surrounded by soft streams of wind, and at the level of his head, 4 circles appeared. He, without losing his serious, focused facial expression, noted with obvious satisfaction that the girl was very lucky in this situation. Suddenly, from the 4 circles emerged various ingredients for the potion: an unknown herb, several vials, and a pouch. The alchemist added that the girl should not worry about her father. He was here and would help him. Tilting his head back slightly, he enjoyed what he was doing. He had not felt such freedom and peace for a long time. Around him, as if in a magical atmosphere, flowed streams of energy and light, filling him with sincere joy and tranquility. When the ingredients fully appeared, Vacant directed them into the alchemical cauldron, and they swiftly flew inside, leaving behind not only a dazzling trail of light, but also a gentle, barely perceptible breeze. The pot lit up with such bright and strange light, as if a living fire had flared inside it, and this light softly enveloped the entire room, filling it with pleasant warmth and creating a feeling of coziness and comfort. The alchemist spread his arms and continued to create energy and rays of light, and he himself realized that he liked it. He sincerely believed that studying and practicing alchemy not only made him better, but also allowed him to make an important contribution to creating a bright future for all humanity. It does not matter what happened to alchemy during his 500-year sleep, the main thing is that people have always strived and will strive for a bright future, because this aspiration is at the very heart of our nature. That is why Vacant and other alchemists, one after another, took on new experiments, not stopping in their persistent attempt to make the lives of everyone around better. The alchemist recalled the faces of his comrades, who proudly studied the new with him and developed side by side, overcoming all difficulties on their path. Closing his eyes and sharply crossing his arms in front of his face so that a click echoed throughout the room, the hero prepared for the final step. Shouting, "Create," he opened his eyes and released streams of light around the room that flew seemingly chaotically, but in just a moment, they merged into one bright and sparkling star that shone. The light went out, and the alchemist was already holding the spiritual potion of Arunia in his hands. It helps ease the symptoms of poisoning from the potion and initiates the body's recovery process. Having received the order to give the healing mixture, Zosmos began absorbing it from the open jar like a sponge. After that, he rushed to the sick man and began circling above him, pouring the contents directly onto the bed. The medicine poured onto the tavern owner like magical powder that sparkled and reflected sunlight. It was visible how the skin on his face instantly brightened and took on a healthier shade. Zosmos finished the work and said that the body would recover in a couple of hours. It was already clear that the medicine had worked, and a barely noticeable calm smile blossomed on the man's face. Vacant turned to the girl and calmed her, assuring that now everything would definitely be fine with her father. But the girl herself did not share his joy. She was confused and did not understand what had happened at all. The alchemist, pleased with what he had done, smiled. This medicine would greatly exhaust the man, but he would feel better, so it was worth giving him another 2 or 3 days to rest. Seizing the moment, the boy asked to stay in the inn a little longer to watch over the patient's condition. The assistant was worried that the girl might tell someone about the strange flying cube, because no one here really knows about artificial beings, but it turned out that Fiora did not even understand what it was. The young waitress cried with happiness, and a warm, sincere smile shone on her face. She did not even know how to thank them. Vakin looked at her and smiled warmly. He was simply doing what he considered his duty as an alchemist. It was his calling and obligation to the people. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. She had imagined alchemists quite differently. A few days later, while Vakin was eating, he sighed deeply, raised the fork to his mouth, and began talking about his powers. Apparently, he had not fully recovered yet, and some of his might had disappeared. Zosmos confirmed his teacher's reasoning. His characteristics had indeed noticeably changed. His magical and intellectual abilities had weakened, as had his psychological age, so he needed to be careful. The sad alchemist accepted that he had become weaker and that he would have to live with it, but suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by a sharp elbow strike in the back. The energetic and cheerful tavern owner Edgar, holding a huge juicy piece of meat, smiling with genuine care in his eyes, generously urged the young boy at the table to eat more because he owed him. Vakin awkwardly tried to refuse. He was already full, but Edgar insisted. A young body needs to eat a lot, and it seemed that because of the incredibly tasty food at the tavern, the boy had gained about 5 kilograms. The owner of the Dancing Duck smiled, patted the boy on the shoulder, and assured him that everything was free for him, but the alchemist cautiously moved away and insisted that he still wanted to pay himself. Edgar asked if Vakin was going to join the Adventurers Guild. It was the easiest way for a traveler to earn money, but the boy only looked at him in surprise. Who were these adventurers? The tavern owner pointed to the tall building outside the window and said that it was the guild, advising me to at least register there just in case. The archives say, aventurists, the closest to alchemists in these times, and probably they also earn money by any means. Filled with determination, the legendary alchemist who had slept for 500 years headed to the magnificent building, and the grateful Ophi Anta just waved to him. The alchemist stepped onto the bridge leading to the guild entrance. Flags fluttered on the building. The guild itself had a watchtower and a luxuriously decorated facade, but alchemy was no longer what it once was, and a new threat hung in the air. First-generation alchemist was surprised to realize he had overslept 521 years and found himself among a noisy crowd of rough men in heavy armor, which only emphasized their physical strength. He always tried to live peacefully and provoke no one, but as soon as he entered the guild, men immediately appeared around him, openly showing contempt and aggression. Confused and bewildered, he only raised his hands in a gesture of apology and, trying to clarify the situation, explained what was wrong with him and why he caused such a reaction. Just an hour ago, the boy, full of confidence and determination, crossed the bridge that led straight to the guild. He was impatiently waiting for what awaited beyond these gates. He was admiring it from the inside, and Zosmos, unable to contain his curiosity, also flew out to inspect the surroundings. Elegant chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The building had at least 2 floors. The first floor was filled with tables and benches, and the hall itself seemed to be crowded with the most diverse people. Travelers, lost in the festive atmosphere, drank, ate, and chatted heartily. Drinks spilled on the floor. Pieces of food flew in all directions, but no one cared. Vaken was clearly burning with impatience and curiosity, imagining the amazing and exciting things he could see here, but his thoughts were suddenly interrupted by someone's call. A stern warrior pointed at the hero with his finger and said that this place was not for little ones like him. But it was no surprise that one addressing him was one of the experienced adventurers, Beowulf. Without losing his joy, Beacon told how he arrived from a distant country and was advised to look for work here. Beowulf was not satisfied with the answer, smiled, and asked if that was exactly why he decided to become an adventurer. The boy, not losing his kind smile, continued to look at the stern warrior. His face seemed twisted with embarrassment and anger, which made him even more threatening. The warrior, without thinking long, suddenly turned around, pointed with his finger at the reception desk, and gestured for the boy to follow him. The other adventurers were laughing. Beowulf was once again babysitting the novice. It seemed he liked it. Completely ignoring the laughter, the veteran called Shirley to register the novice. The beautiful girl clapped her hands and beamed with joy upon meeting Beowulf and the novice. Her name was Shirley, and she was the administrator of the Adventurers Guild. Shirley offered Var to join them, but he refused because he wanted to remain an adventurer for life. Then, placing a heavy hand on Waken's shoulder, he said that he too would become one. The administrator, with a warm, sincere smile on her face, heartily welcomed the novice who had just joined their famous Adventurers Guild. The alchemist awkwardly scratched his head and admitted that he had no idea who the adventurers were or what they did. So, realizing that the situation needed clarification, he asked for a more detailed explanation. Shirley and Beowulf exchanged silent glances, and at that moment it became clear. His questions were inappropriate and caused concern. The two new acquaintances of Vacant froze in horror. The veteran pointed with a trembling finger at the alchemist and asked how he could come here knowing nothing about adventurers, and the first-generation alchemist clumsily justified himself, saying he was from a very remote region. While Beowulf was guessing where he was from, tribe or jungle, administrator gathered her thoughts and deliberately coughed to attract attention. She was determined to explain everything. The girl said it simply. Adventurers are people who decide for themselves to take on various tasks from the guild and receive rewards for them. Now everything was clear. They were simply jack-of-all-trades in the era of voidstyes was done by the alchemists. The boy was still digesting what he had heard, and meanwhile Beowulf raised a finger, pointed to the task he was going to complete, and advised the novice to watch and learn to understand better. Bo took up the hunt for a large and dangerous beast that was raging wildly. The announcement had its photo, and it truly inspired terror. Vaken began reading. The beast frightened the locals and hunted in the western forest, but he did not manage to finish reading about the reward. The traveler was already gathering with his team for the mission and assured the newcomer that he did not need to count his share. Everything would go to Beowulf and his people, and then they would go have fun. The alchemist froze in surprise. He did not think that a whole group would go on the mission, but after thinking a bit, he decided to just choose another one. Shirley decided to find out who was missing, a mage or a warrior. A confident and hot-tempered guy loudly exclaimed that he was Vacant Ord, the great alchemist. Shirley looked at him in surprise, and the crowd of adventurers fell silent with obvious contempt. A stifling, oppressive atmosphere prevailed in the air. The travelers sighed irritably, and Vacant did not understand at all what was happening and why it caused such a strong reaction. The administrator awkwardly pulled out 3 announcements and said that these were the only tasks for alchemists, but the crowd began to laugh hollowly, and he still could not understand. How could this be? Why so few? The more they chatted, the more disappointed the alchemist became. These short-sighted adventurers discussed who was even doing alchemy now, and he, of course, understood nothing, probably because he came from far away. No one answered why the work of alchemists was so underestimated, and it was scary to ask. No one wanted to make a fool of themselves for nothing. After sorting through the announcements, Vecin confidently handed Shirley one sheet. He was going to take this order. The administrator warned him that fulfilling the order for a potion that would ease treatment would be quite difficult, but added that the newcomer had a whole week to figure out all the details. Suddenly, Vacona was surrounded by adventurers from all sides. One even threw his arm over his shoulder, and the whole crowd laughed and mocked, pushing him to complete the task they considered a futile help. When the alchemist, completely puzzled, asked why they spoke that way, the crowd only burst into loud laughter at how stupid this guy was. 2 mages drew attention to themselves by demonstrating their magic, and with confident faces declared that now everything is decided by magic and miracles, and mages and clerics are the best support classes. Having finished their speeches and praised themselves, they added that they did not expect much from a novice. The main thing was that he brewed useful potions and gave them to them, because that was the maximum he could manage. Completely confused, Bacon decided to ask if magic and miracles really boiled down only to magical and divine power, and Ken answered affirmatively. Back then, alchemists thought that problems could only be solved here and now, and for a short time, they did not use universal potions that could be prepared anytime. Everything came together and the hero was filled with inspiration. That is why adventurers gathered. Alone they would be too vulnerable and would have too many weak spots. But these words did not cause joy in the crowd. The boy was surrounded from all sides, and in the end he was practically pressed against the wall, unable to break out of this ring. The enraged warriors shouted so loudly that the building and the surrounding space echoed. How could the alchemist say such a thing? It seemed vacant should keep his thoughts to himself. But the crowd of angry adventurers did not calm down. They continued shouting that the skills of alchemists were nothing compared to magic and miracles, so the boys better quietly brewed potions and played with stones. Vakenord was extremely disappointed that alchemy had declined so much over the 500 years he was gone. He recalled a merchant he met on the street a few days ago. He was selling low-quality healing potions. That was now the quality standard. It seemed alchemists found themselves in the worst position imaginable. Hopes were shattered by cold reality. The hero was confident that alchemy would rise to unprecedented heights and reveal to people many hidden secrets that could change the world. The boy sharply turned around and with a serious expression on his face headed towards the administrator, despite the shouts and outrage of the crowd. Placing a box of healing elixirs on the counter, he asked where to hand them over. The noisy crowd, which a moment ago loudly scolded him and clearly showed their dissatisfaction, now stood completely bewildered. Shirley asked in surprise where so many potions had come from. The alchemist supposedly had just accepted the order, but it turned out he had his own secrets. A whole chest had been prepared in advance. The travelers still did not calm down. They could not believe it, because the potion was so difficult to brew. One of them snatched a bottle from Vaken and exclaimed that it was just soda water. The alchemist did not resist this at all. He was confident in his creation. The man began to examine the bottle and froze. The potion inside was incredibly beautiful. The bright color and shine attracted glances. Carefully examining the contents, he confidently assured that this potion was unlikely to help, but amid the loud, cheerful laughter of the confident crowd around him, he boldly and greedily began to swallow this strange liquid. The next moment shock froze on his face. He clearly felt a surge of strength, powerful and overflowing his body, as if energy was trying to break out in a stormy stream. The medicine turned out to be so effective that the finger the warrior had lost long ago grew back again, as if nothing had happened. The warrior trembled, looking at his hands. He could not understand whether it was a dream or reality because he had never encountered such a potion. He rushed to the alchemist with a burning desire to find out how he had prepared such a potion, and Vaken, looking at him in surprise, only uttered a question that made him think, wouldn't it have been better if the finger had not grown back? The traveler shook his head. He bit his lip, trying to hold back tears of joy, but they treacherously ran down his cheeks. He burst into tears like a child and rushed to embrace the empty space. It turned out that this man had once been a hunter. When he lost a finger, he had to change class, but now he could use a bow again. The other adventurers froze, listening to the conversation between the traveler and the novice. He was pouring out thanks and exclaiming that this healing potion was special and could cure any ailment. Deadly silence reigned around, filling the room like a thick fog. All the adventurers fell silent and froze. No one could utter a word because no one expected such a turn of events. All the adventurers, as if on command, turned around and instantly rushed to the administration desk, knocking each other down and raising dust from the floor. When the crowd calmed down a bit, Shirley shyly called vacant. Requests for healing potions intensified even more, and Shirley placed a stack of papers on the table. Vacant exhaled deeply. Of course, this was not what he wanted, but maybe it was even better this way, although the number of orders frightened him. The crowd started to murmur again. This attracted the alchemist's attention. What was that? A crowd of previously aggressive men greedily rubbed their hands, waiting for the potion ordered from the alchemist to be drunk. Their eyes shone as if they were about to pounce on that boy. All this was readable on their faces. Zosimus could not understand how everything could turn out this way. Vakenord proudly raised his head and thought. This was his chance. The time had come to show what he was really capable of in alchemy. After some time, he wiped the sweat from his face and placed another box of potions on the table. It seemed to be the last one, but surprisingly Bacon again dealt with all those behind too quickly. Heavy muffled footsteps sounded at the entrance. The sound instantly attracted attention, and someone slowly, but inevitably and decisively approached the guild doors, after which everyone present instantly turned their faces to the entrance in anticipation. It was the wounded Beowulf. His armor was covered in blood, his hands and even his head were dripping blood. He clenched his teeth, holding back the pain. Worried and frightened Bacon, seeing B.O. in such a state, immediately asked what exactly happened in the war that brought him to such a terrible condition. The alchemist looked at Beowulf in surprise, who staggered into the guild. Every movement showed fatigue. He was covered in blood and carried a huge sword on his back. The novice was confused by what had happened to the experienced adventurer. He could not imagine how it happened. The man impressed with his bravery. Although they had to flee from a beast that turned out to be much stronger than they thought, he intended to return to the fight after a short rest to help his comrades. Vakin took one of the bottles of healing potion that he had been distributing to the entire guild today and handed it to Beowulf. Pleased with himself, the newly minted adventurer admitted that he had prepared this potion himself. The warrior decisively drank it, thinking that things could not get worse. But the effect of this potion struck him much more than he could have imagined. At that moment, a sudden and powerful surge of strength and energy flooded his entire body. The wounds on him were completely healed, as if the battle he had fled from in despair had never happened. He looked with amazement at the places where blood had been flowing just a minute ago. Beowulf turned to ask how the alchemist had done it, but the newcomer was already standing in a circle of admiring people. Everyone was applauding, and the intense attention made him a little embarrassed. The warrior did not fully understand what had happened, but was glad that Vakin was the center of attention, and that his potion had truly healed the wounds and restored the strength lost in battle. He was already about to return to help his comrades, but the alchemist stopped him. With determination in his eyes, he extended several bottles, offered to take them with him, and assured that they would be very useful. The veteran accepted the help, waved his hand, and left, promising that when he returned, they would drink together in honor of the victory. Zosimo's hoped that the warrior would cope with the monster. The assistant reported the discovery of the traces of the Tower of the Sage right in the direction of the Western Forest, where battles with monsters are currently taking place. Vacant Orid was inspired. This is great news. The Tower of the Sage can be used as a home, and at the same time store his alchemical materials and tools in it. When the boy was already confidently heading towards the guild exit, Shirley stopped him and firmly assured the alchemist that he was not going anywhere. It was quite clear that Shirley was unwavering. She asked the frightened Vacant if he had read the guild license terms he had recently joined. Hearing the refusal, the administrator finally decided it was time to explain in detail to the newly minted adventurer the main rules of this place. The guild has a strict ranking system from 10, the lowest, to 1, the highest. Tasks are given only by rank, and you can only take those that correspond to your current level, so everyone gets a job truly suitable for their skills and experience. Vacant was clearly very upset when he found out that he was starting at rank 10 and therefore could not go with Beowulf's team to hunt dangerous monsters, and Shirley was also sure that the alchemist had no place on the front line. The administrator spread out a stack of orders and made it clear, choose any of them, but nothing outside this stack. The girl smiled, took the top sheet of paper, and, interested in what was on it, tried to attract the newcomer's attention. When Shirley realized that this was not helping, she quietly approached him from behind, lightly poked him in the shoulder, and whispered in his ear that while she was drinking from him, who knows, maybe she would even fall in love. Obviously not expecting such pressure, the boy immediately rushed to the exit, fleeing from the threats and leaving behind a smiling girl. And while Shirley, pleased with herself, smiled slyly and wondered if she had overdone it, Vacant was already running to the Western Forest. Despite all her fervent attempts to convince the alchemist, the girl did not achieve her goal, and the boy finally, without hesitation, rushed into the very heart of the forest where the battle was raging. What doubts could there be here? If there were any alchemical materials here, Bacon simply could not stand aside. He had no right to miss such an opportunity. Zosimo's finally figured out his mentor. It was hinted that he fled from Shirley. Funny, since the mentor was already over 40 and still had no girlfriend, justifying it by saying that for a true researcher, women are secondary. The reflections were interrupted when the alchemist arrived where the battle was taking place. The warriors were desperately trying to fend off the evil monsters, although they were significantly more numerous. Bacon looked around carefully, trying to imagine how critical and difficult this situation was. It seemed that everything was really bad. Beowulf was holding back the monster with all his might, and his comrades could no longer stand on their feet. From behind the trees emerged the most powerful enemy, the great magic beast, Lesser Teresk. He was simply huge. As soon as he opened his jaws and let out a deafening roar, his extremely sharp teeth were revealed. Zosimus reviewed the archives and reported that this was a new species, and Wacken instantly realized that the material he would extract from it would also be new. Beowulf noticed the alchemist and began to scold him. Why did he even come here? There is no place for novices here, the monster is too strong. The alchemist, lost in his own thoughts, no longer paid attention to the surrounding world, and his face became calm, but a sinister grimace clearly emerged on it, making him gloomy and mysterious. Beowulf wanted to stop that boy, but it was already too late. Wacken was only muttering under his breath about materials, about how much new he could get. In the next moment he was already ready for battle. The openings in his storage opened again, and 4 shiny stones jumped out of them. Where else would alchemists start looking for the monster's weak spot? The stones that the boy clenched in his hands had a special nature and meaning. They were not just ordinary stones, but unique artifacts embodying the 4 main elements. Vaken did not waste time on thoughts, and Douch instantly decided that the best way out was to leave everything immediately. While Beowulf's people stood with their mouths open in surprise, the alchemist threw all 4 stones at the monsters with all his might. Some blazed in fire and could not extinguish themselves, others froze in ice blocks, some were lifted into the air by the wind like a tornado and thunderously thrown to the ground, while others were less lucky, struck by lightning. The travelers stood in confusion. What could this possibly be? This is not even magic, but the effect of some objects, and probably they had never encountered such power before. Vaken did not even think about stopping. He continued throwing stones, which Beowulf and his team barely managed to dodge. Only when the clearing was strewn with the bodies of the defeated monsters did the alchemist finally stop, and the previously heard roar of pain from these creatures gradually subsided, dissolving into the air. The boy did not even have time to realize what the weakness of these monsters was. They turned out to be too fragile, but the surprise did not leave the faces of the adventurers. Giggling, the satisfied alchemist decided that fire was indeed the most effective. He did not even notice how terrifying he looked at that moment, completely absorbed in thoughts and quiet pleasure. But now the warriors felt the full horror of his presence. He truly looked unexpectedly terrifying to them. Vaken turned his head, still with the same terrifying grimace, and looked at the last monster that remained alive after his elemental stones. He stood right in front of the gigantic, loudly roaring monster, showing not a drop of fear and not flinching from its piercing roar, as if it was already throwing him a real challenge and was ready to fight. Circles appeared on the floor, from which streams of light burst forth and surrounded the alchemist. What was the weakness of this monster? How to attack it? The boy was about to find out all this. From the circles, along with the light, magical swords of all elements began to emerge. Vaken became serious. It was clear that he was interested in the potential of this huge monster. The next moment the boy sharply pulled out an alchemical staff from the stash, a magical tool and reliable weapon. When he pulled it out, he immediately made a swing and gave himself the order, "Start." All the swords he pulled out instantly pointed their tips at the monster, ready for the decisive strike. The next moment, they simultaneously rushed in one direction at the speed of light. In an instant, dozens of swords fell upon the small Tarask, and the monster could only helplessly roar in pain. But the monster turned out to be not so simple. It still stood confidently on its feet, and this stunned not only the alchemist, who expected a greater effect from his actions, but also the entire team of adventurers, who watched what was happening with surprise and horror. With one sharp jerk, Vaken cut off the head of the monster, which was the leader of this group and also the last one remaining. The giant carcass and head fell to the ground with a terrible crash, flooding it with blood that oozed out. The monster was finally defeated. The travelers just sat with their mouths agape and watched everything. How the alchemist managed to do all this, and at such a young age. And the scariest thing about all this was that the first generation of alchemists 500 years ago themselves searched for and gathered materials, rather than just sitting in laboratories over potions. And this monster became yet another victim of one of the most dangerous alchemists' vacant hoard. A smile always played on his face when, armed with a sharp knife, he carefully and greedily cut out valuable and rare material needed for his dangerous experiments. After some time, Bacon was already in the tavern, dancing duck. Suddenly, a pouch with coins fell onto the table with a loud clatter. The coins scattered across the table and caused an even bigger commotion. The alchemist tore himself away from his work and looked at Beowulf, asking what money he had poured out, to which he received the answer. It was part of the reward for killing the lesser Tarask, although the boy only had the materials he had collected. The traveler shook his head. Sharing a deserved reward is one of the main rules of adventurers, so he was not going to back down. The warrior even made a deal with the administrator, saying that Vaken was a temporary participant, although that was not his task. Stopping the argument, the boy took the money and decided to invest it in opening a laboratory. And while the boy thanked Beowulf for the funding, he became interested in what exactly the alchemist was brewing, and the latter was so delighted by the question that he decided to demonstrate his creation. Bacon was inventing a stove that did not require firewood, and proudly showed his creation 40 heating modes, a fire protection system, and a heat-saving mode. Beowulf was already beginning to brush off the persistent stories of that boy, who just wanted to leave the embodiment of alchemist's wisdom in this tavern, when suddenly Fio entered such an empty cauldron. The girl smiled happily, pressing her hands to her chest, as if joy filled her when she saw this amazing invention. Seeing such a reaction, the alchemist gestured toward the stove and offered the girl to use his creation, hoping she would rush to hug him out of gratitude. It seems Vacant miscalculated somewhere. This joy was directed not at him nor at his creation, but at Beowulf. The girl approached him and asked what he was doing here. The alchemist's disappointment was indescribable. The waitress, to the boy's disappointment, kept hovering around Beowulf and invited him to go have a snack in the tavern, and Vacant, embarrassed, asked how Fio knew Beowulf. The boy was surprised when the girl told him that he was the strongest adventurer in this city, and that was why everyone knew him. The alchemist found himself in an unexpected situation and was completely confused. He, not hiding his displeasure, puffed out his cheeks and muttered something incomprehensible about Beowulf's popularity. However, Beowulf was not the one who was being talked about the most right now. The city was most interested in this mysterious alchemist of incredible power, whose potions could cure everything. Soon Beowulf and Viking headed to the Sullivan Adventurers Guild. Suddenly, as soon as they approached the entrance, a whole crowd of people rushed at them. Everyone begged the alchemist to join their groups. They were even ready to start a fight for the right to take him into their team and use his abilities for their own purposes. The reason for this phenomenon was that rumors about the great alchemist, who possessed unparalleled knowledge and talents, spread at an incredible speed, and although he received dozens of offers, he refused them all. He was eager to open his own laboratory, where he could implement his ideas and projects, and was ready to accept anyone who wanted to help him. Beowulf helped that man disperse the impatient crowd by sending it to Shirley's table. Warriors and mages rushed to leave their applications at the registration desk. But it turned out that he was doing this not with the best intentions. The traveler carefully took out an order and invited Vacant to join their team for this mission. Beowulf made the most pleading facial expression, hoping it would convince Ken, but his efforts barely had any effect. Ken remained unmoved. The offer did not imply that the alchemist had to join the ranks of the Black Dogs. That was the name of the veterans group. And just as the warrior passionately shared his thoughts about the essence of the task, an important escort mission, promising incredible tension, he was suddenly interrupted by the one who had just entered the guild. It was Vivek who dared to do it, the mage of the Black Dog. At first glance, it was clear that he had no intention of participating in the mission with the alchemist, especially with someone so young. Vivek proudly said that if he were alongside the Black Dogs during the battle with the monsters, they would handle them on their own, and the child's help would only be a burden for them. Approaching Vacant, the mage looked at him so threateningly, as if trying to break through his defense with his gaze, and clearly showing his hostility. Vave sharply and loudly ordered the alchemist to get lost. The commander of the Black Dog tried to calm his mage, but he did not even listen. He shouted that he was tired of babysitting stupid and incapable adventurers. Vave considered alchemists the biggest parasites in this world. He waved his magic wand and sent a swirling vortex at Vacant, but fortunately the boy reacted quickly and managed to dodge. While everyone tried to calm the mage who was destroying everything in the guild, the boy was only amazed at why alchemists were so hated in this world, and it always upset him terribly. And yet Vacant suggested to Vave to talk and discuss everything. Although he had already destroyed half the guild, the sorcerer had no intention of listening to the alchemist. He, like hundreds of other alchemists, could not take responsibility for the mirror space. Mirror space is a unique idea. There exists a world, an exact copy of our real world. Previously, alchemists conducted huge experiments directly in such worlds because their complex and sometimes incredibly powerful weapons simply could not be tested normally in real life. And finally, Beowulf lifted the veil of secrecy and told what caused Vave's great rage. His older sister was forever trapped in the mirror space as a result of an accident. The mage confirmed the commander's words. His sister, who barely showed interest in the Academy of Magic, was taken away and immediately began to be tested with an artifact called the Darby Mirror. It seems this artifact was discarded about 500 years ago. How did it end up in our times again? Vave grew angrier and angrier. His sister would never return and would stay there forever, and no alchemist was willing to take responsibility. The sorcerer was already suffocating, but had no intention of stopping. He swung again into the void to strike, loudly insisting that he wanted to get rid of every alchemist. The boy suddenly grabbed his hand tightly, clutching to prevent further blows. Despite the fiery passions and fierce anger seemingly erupting from his opponent, Vacant remained remarkably calm and even smiled at Vava, who was boiling with rage. The alchemist decided he absolutely had to help him. The sorcerer became even angrier. What could this boy do? Vave had devoted his entire life to becoming a mage and finding his sister, only to learn that for this, he needed the sacred bell of Fulcanelli. Travelers had heard of such an invention only in fairy talesso Vive completely despaired because he understood his little sister would stay there forever. If only he had that spell, he would definitely be able to bring back his older sister. The mage, broken by grief and despair, could no longer hold back tears, grabbed his head and felt his heart breaking. And while the other adventurers sympathized with their comrade, Bacon probably thought of something. Slyly smiling, he put his hand in his pocket. It was from there that he pulled out the sacred bell of Fulcanelli and, smiling, handed it to Vava. It seemed like mockery, not a funny joke. The wizard had spent so much time looking for a way to save his sister, and the boy did it so simply, just took out a bell from his pocket that doesn't even exist in this world. The alchemist explained that it was indeed the sacred bell of Fulcanelli, but the Vavais, along with the commander of the Black Dogs, simply became furious at what they heard, taking it as a cruel joke unacceptable in their serious situation. Then Viking also pulled out the mirror to demonstrate, and the sacred bell of Fulcanelli was created to pull out those who got stuck and to rescue in accidents. When the theory of the mirror space was first put forward, many different artifacts were created that did not work quite correctly, and because of this, accidents happened. Preparing to use this mysterious artifact, Vakin took a deep breath. Inside him, irritation and disappointment were growing, because everything around clearly troubled him a lot. In his time, this spell was read on every corner, but when you look at the Royal Academy, one of the most prestigious universities, you want to ask, why can't it solve such a seemingly simple problem? He sank even deeper into thoughts and, using the bell, continued to search for the girl in the mirror space, but the obsessive thought whether he would succeed in reviving alchemy in this world did not give him peace. The alchemist found her, pulled her into this world, and the room filled with bright, dazzling light pouring from the mirror. The boy sharply jerked his hand, trying with all his might to pull the girl closer to this world. In the bright light, the image of the girl gradually emerged, as if she was swimming out of the mirror, illuminated by a wonderful and majestic glow. When the girl fully flew into this world, the mirror shattered into small, sharp shards. The fragments whirled around the room with a rumble, sparkling with flashes, further enhancing the sense of mystery. A gentle blush appeared on her cheeks, and it seemed that she was sleeping soundly. A light breeze from the mirror shards, scattered in all directions, barely tousled her hair. No one in the room expected this. Only Vacant smiled confidently. He did it again. The girl fell right onto the one who was saving her, but fortunately he caught her. He was ready for such a turn and caught her in time, preventing possible injuries and consequences of the fall. Vacant explained to Sopping Wava that although he saved his sister by finding her in the mirror world, she is now very weak and needs a week of rest, after which she will be able to live as before. He gave the girl to his sobbing brother. He could not believe that all this was really happening to him. He had long since given up and was obsessed only with revenge on all those he considered guilty. Vavai could not hold back his feelings and sobbed continuously, was overwhelmed with joy. He had finally met his dear, beloved older sister, whom he had not seen for so long. The crowd of adventurers standing aside was both moved and shocked by what was happening. What else could they do? How would he surprise them next time? The mage, feeling the full weight of his deed, fell to his knees and begged forgiveness for disrespecting the young alchemist. Although he was over 40, he showered thanks and apologies without measure. Vakin, satisfied with the completed task, only smiled sympathetically at Vavai. Suddenly Beowulf sharply interrupted this so touching conversation and announced that they were setting off on that mission he had mentioned earlier tomorrow. A little later, the travelers, tired after a hard day, were resting at the Dancing Duck, and Fia was clearly displeased. She puffed out her cheeks childishly and petulantly and looked blankly and offended, as if expecting him to react to her dissatisfaction. Ken tried to say that Beo forced him to go with them, but the girl just snorted and turned away. How could he deceive her? Had promised to go to the party with her tomorrow. One of the adventurers, watching this scene, burst out laughing loudly. Had never seen Fio like this. It seemed she really liked the alchemist. The girl bit her lip in embarrassment, but when Zosimo's suggested they step away, she couldn't hold back. The next day, already in the morning, the adventurers stood on the street. All preparations were made, and they were ready to get to work. But this idyll was interrupted by the shout of a man in glasses. It was a scientist of the Royal Academy of Gizar. He was vehemently outraged that an alchemist participated in the expedition. In his view, this was completely unacceptable. While Vakin awkwardly scratched his head, Beo persistently tried to convince the experienced scientist that the decision to take the alchemist with them would prove very successful, and that in the future he would not regret his choice. Jezar, clenching his teeth in rage and indignation, roared decisively that no one should consider him a foolish and naive boy, and declared that alchemists are merely vulgar, fake competitors of true scientists. Captain Cherpaniksov assured that they would not leave without this boy, and in that case the scientist could set off alone, without their escort. Zosimo's carefully touched his master's head. He wanted to warn him about the premonition that this mission would be dangerous, but precisely because of this, Ken agreed to go with Bayo's team. It was a mission to escort Professor Gazar to the Asuari Tower, which stands in ruins near the Dunatek River basin. After the rainy season, the area around the destination is full of monsters. The conditions here are too unfavorable to explore this place as part of a group of civilians, but on the other hand, after the rainy season, the area abounds with plants and sea gifts, and the civilian thought he might find something useful there. The boy personally tried to convince the scientist that there was no reason to worry, and persistently assured him that he would no longer interfere with his important research. Gazar waved his hand irritably in his opinion. Such obvious things did not even need to be discussed. Some alchemist could not interfere with his noble experiments. The dissatisfied scientist reminded him, "Time is money, time to get to work," and stomped towards the cart. The alchemist sighed with relief, and Bayav, patting him on the shoulder, followed Gazar. Finally, the long-awaited journey began. Several people set off enthusiastically, but so far they had only covered a small part of the planned route. Ken was talking with his assistant. They had not ridden in a cart for a long time because they often used fast teleportation, and sometimes it was really worth just relaxing like that. The conversation was interrupted by Oscar from the Black Dogs, who jumped out of the cart. With a joyful smile, he greeted Wayne and sincerely hoped that they could work productively together. The man decided to ask Ken if he would mind a simple, casual form of address after all. They were both from the same guild, which meant they were friends and comrades. Oscar's sister, Miss Cal, sternly warned her brother, "Don't relax, we are at work." Instead, Vavai advised the alchemist to relax a bit. He was with the Black Dogs. But Miss Cal was right. Zosmos informed his master that a group was approaching from the right side of the road, and Ken immediately warned the Black Dogs, but they did not leave the road. Within just a few minutes, the carriage with horses was surrounded from all sides by armed robbers who acted quickly and coherently. Their demand was quite usual for people of their world, who led exactly that kind of life. They sought something truly valuable and meaningful, and at the same time threatened to instantly kill everyone in the carriage, without any exception. The scholar, overwhelmed by fear and confusion, quickly hid behind the backs of the brave adventurers, who were clearly dissatisfied and outraged by this unexpected encounter. While the bandits, full of malicious joy, giggled and laughed, the team of Black Dogs quickly jumped off the wagon and immediately lined up, ready to repel any threat and protect Hazar. While the scientist panicked, Beale was already building a battle plan in his head. He turned to Vakin and suggested taking on two of them, but the alchemist once again sank into his thoughts and did not notice the others at all. Ken argued that the robbers had not changed at all. Even after 500 years, they only robbed and killed, but then he fell silent and returned to Beowulf. With an empty, as if switched-off face, Ken finally asked if it is a crime to put someone to sleep forever. While B.O. stood bewildered, the bandits, clearly confident, laughed loudly and rushed at the adventurous. After all, one who fears punishment should not even raise a weapon. With a sudden, completely unexpected strike, when no one expected action from Vakin, he without the slightest hesitation cut off the head of one of the bandits who was about to attack him, and blood splattered in all directions. The alchemist confidently stated that he fears no punishment. He simply wanted to know the true price of each of their lives. Bandits froze in place, as if their legs were rooted to the ground. Ken, feeling the tension rising, sighed deeply. It seemed that now he would have to deal with problems again. Pointing a stick at the bandits, he threatened them. The best thing they can do now is pray, and if they do not want to die, they should fall to their knees and ask him for forgiveness 100 times. Gazar froze in shock, fell on his buttocks, his body trembling with fear, and he asked, "What is happening here?" The main hero stood with a weapon in his hands, and around lay dozens of his fallen enemies. They showed no signs of life. Vakin was a little confused and said that it seemed he had shocked the professor a bit. Then he asked how many people he should bring back to life. The man behind continued to tremble with fear. Zosimo's approached Vakin and said that it seemed they could be brought back to life, to which Vakin replied sadly that it was unfortunate. According to the 30-minute rule, a person can be revived with secret potions, but it all depends on the condition of the body. Acquaintances said that he stood out again, but he is a good person, did not even need them, and the main hero apologized to them, promising that next time he would choose another way. After some time, their phaeton moved on. They raced across the steppes, and Gazar was still trembling with fear, biting his lower lip with his teeth. The hero apologized and really overdid it a bit, to which he was told not to pay attention. Aristocrats are always cowards because they do not lift a finger themselves, only sitting in chairs. Suddenly Zosim interrupted them, turned to Vakin, addressing him as Sir, and said that he had done what he was asked. The main hero thanked him. The assistant said he was too kind. At that time the enemies came to their senses, and Zosimo declared that they all had to leave. Moreover, He had bitten into their heads and did not think they would follow the path of a bandit. They could have told him not to say that, because they are people and if they make a mistake once, they can make a mistake again. The main character thought about how in his era people repeatedly started wars and killed each other with weapons created by alchemists. Even bandits had the alchemist's weapons. He was also mistaken, naively hoping that this would not happen. Meanwhile, he continued to lead the cart. The hero sank into deep thoughts. His face faded with sadness, and he thought about how many times he had already been wrong. At the same time, the commander returned to the professor and asked if he understood why they took vacant with them, to which the professor answered affirmatively. At that moment, the boy said that the road was still long, so he needed to prepare. During the rainy season, the water here reaches the wheels. The cart cannot go further, so they abandoned the carriage and went on foot. Soon a giant crab monster will appear on their path, and everyone will rush into battle with it. After the last enemy, they will encounter a huge slime, and behind it enormous water insects, and all of this is terribly frightening. As soon as night falls, a crowd of skeletons will crawl out. These monsters will surround them, and it will be extremely difficult to resist them. However, to achieve victory, the main character will use his weapon. A huge energy barrier will burst out of it, which with its power will deal with all the enemies. The professor was shocked. He was asked again if he was glad they took the main character with them. He irritably replied that he understood how cool he was, and another just said that the worst was yet to come. Everything here was foggy because of the rainy season. They had to wait until it cleared up, so they decided to eat, and everyone agreed. Gizar said that they talked like that. They needed to go faster. Did they really think he was rushing for no reason? They replied that they were worried about his safety. The man said that they were adventurers, so they had to come up with something. Another man stepped aside and said that the professor seemed obsessed with his work. Bacon asked if the research was really that important. They replied that he seemed to be studying the history of magic. He became interested. After some time, they came across a new structuria tower that turned out to be an ossuary. They were glad to have finally reached it, and the main character was certain at that moment. Without a doubt, these were the ruins of the Tower of the Wise. The team looked at the professor and warned, "There might be monsters ahead, so don't run forward, do you understand?" Gazar cut in, "What are you even talking about? I don't have time." He had to urgently solve the mystery of this tower and secure a place in the academy. After that, the man rushed to the building, while the others only wondered how much trouble he had caused, and Vakin was surprised why he was running late. He was told that this tower disappears immediately after the end of the rainy season. No one knows why. Wacken said he understood everything and thought to himself that perhaps some functions of the Tower of the Wise still work. Is there really fog everywhere here? No, it is fog of bones. It fills the tower with bones instead of knowledge. The main character turned to Zosimo's and said that he had already begun to act, to which he replied that he was only beginning to restore the archive. Bacon thought these were the ruins of the former city on the Donat River. Once art and tourism flourished here, but now only miserable ruins remained. Broken walls and fallen columns stood instead of houses. In a moment, the main character felt strange currents. Zosim addressed him, and Vakin noticed that he also felt something in the air, so his assistant suggested retreating immediately. The main character said that Nushi once lived here long ago. If he is still here, even after 500 years, that is a real trouble. Vakin's gaze became very focused, but he was insanely nervous. Looking at the monster before him, he thought it would not be easy. The main characters shouted "BO" that they needed to escape immediately. A huge monster was approaching them. The men looked at him and asked if it was his premonition again. If Bacon was so scared, then there was definitely some danger, and the boy added that if they were noticed, there would be real trouble. They called Oscar, but this colonel waved them off and ordered them to go. He himself was preparing to retreat. The professor began shouting about the nonsense they were saying, and then one of the escorts asked him if he didn't understand what was important right now. Bale asked what happened to Gizar. The main character thought to himself that he was a researcher and therefore could understand him. Zosimo's shouted that there was no time, the monster would be here very soon. At that moment, the monster again burst out from under the ground. Pieces of the surface flew in all directions. His acquaintances froze in horror. It was a giant monster, the donut deathworm. Everyone shouted that they had never seen such creatures before. Someone exclaimed that they were terribly disgusting. Besides the huge monster, tiny worms were crawling as well. Bacon said that these were his children. Be careful. He also said that they were all very greedy and quite fierce. There were more than 100 of them. We need to move away from the swamp and water right now. A friend anxiously asked if they could even cope with them. After that, he called the professor. The bald man said that Geyser was fleeing from the monsters to a ruined building that looked extremely dangerous, and everyone asked him about it in shock. Zosim said that in battle it would have been better for him to be with them, but now he had fled and that was bad. The hero agreed but thought to himself that he could not just leave him to die. His conscience would not allow it. Vakin clenched his fist and resolutely said that he had no choice. Then a voice sounded from behind. He really had no choice, he is scared. Turned out to be his friend the commander, who asked if he was really ready to risk his life for someone who despises the lives of his guards. He said they were leaving right now. To this, the main character said that this guy was quite dry. Zosmos said that it was indeed a wise decision for a commander, and Vakin said that he would try to do everything himself. The main character shouted for the others to run to the tower. To the ossuary, he was going to use dangerous artifacts, and everyone froze at these words. In the hands of the main character, a tiny magical seal suddenly appeared, and he seriously said that he would figure out what to do with this creature. The commander asked what he intended to do alone. Another man agreed and said it was impossible, but Vakin again asked to hear his request. Acquaintances told him, "Don't you dare die if it gets too hot, run," and meanwhile, they cleared their way by exterminating the worm's children. Zosimo said that Bayo decided to clear a path for his retreat. It seems they had already become comrades. The main character agreed and said that was indeed the case. After that, Vakin noticed the monster, shouted to it that he would become its opponent, took out an artifact, handheld explosive rockets, and rushed into attack. Almost immediately, he threw this artifact directly at the enemy and shouted, "Catch!" The hit struck the target. He confirmed it himself. The boy was wildly delighted, but then something unexpected happened. The worm began to suck air into its mouth, then fiercely attacked him. The hero did not expect this and swore loudly. The beam was aimed directly at him. The commander and the rest of the crew shouted his name. No one could understand what had happened to him, and through the smoke, only the silhouette of the Viking was visible. After a few moments, the smoke cleared as if the hero had removed a semi-transparent veil. It turned out to be Phania's silks, a very thin magical material that hardens upon impact. Vakin admitted that he had few such things, so he had to be careful. But then he decided to take a risk and drank the hero's potion. It significantly enhanced physical abilities. After that, he threw the potion bottle back without even looking back, looked determined, and said that the fight was beginning. The main character began to circle around the monster. He was insanely fast. The worm tried again to attack him with a beam, but the boy managed to dodge. But as it turned out, Bacon decided to use his trick. The worm's body exploded. His acquaintances said it was amazing, and now they understood why he asked to step back, and the professor asked if it was the power of the alchemist. The main character thought that the defense was strong and the blows barely penetrated. If he didn't have to finish the fight, maybe it would have worked out, but would he really have to use it? Zosimos asked how he could help, and Vakin replied briefly, "The most important thing is not to let weaklings get close." His assistant said he understood. At that moment, his cubic body began to glow. Rays spread out and dealt with the worm's children. Numerous enemies were defeated. Vakin asked when Zosimos learned magic. Then he added that thanks to him, he was able to complete his training. He had something special for him. A small dark sphere began to grow in the hero's palms. Holding it, he stepped away from the spikes the worm was shooting at him, but one of them still scratched his face. The main character was very angry about this. He sharply threw the sphere toward the worm, then said everything was ready. Vakin himself did not close his eyes for a moment, then everything around was engulfed in smoke. In a moment the smoke cleared, and it turned out that everything around, even the monster itself, was frozen. These were droplets of ice. The artifact, thanks to the movement of surrounding molecules, creates absolute zero. Everyone began to ask what it was, and how everything could turn so suddenly in an instant. Zosim said they had to use many artifacts, and he did not think that Vacant would have to use ice droplets. To this, the main character closed his eyes, drew his weapon, and said there was nothing to be done. The enemy was serious, but they managed him without human losses. Vakin instantly threw his staff directly at the worm. It hit the body, and it crumbled into small pieces. All the men froze in shock at what he had done. The broken worm began to fall to the ground in pieces, breaking apart even more, while the main hero stood amidst these fragments. Vakin smiled widely. The smile was red. He held a magic stone in his hands and said that the stone they would get from the worm could be worth much more than this one. He was bursting with the desire to create, and at that moment, the whole world seemed to bloom with bright colors. The professor called him by name. The hero turned around and joyfully exclaimed that he was alive, to which the man replied that alchemists are indeed capable of such things. In response to his words, Bacon said that this is not a competition who is better, who is worse. Alchemists are also capable of a lot. The professor smiled and happily said that he had opened his eyes, after which he thanked him for it. Others were shocked by his words. It was unexpected. Gazar looked at the frozen sculptures and said that the demon King Talos, who had mastered all the deep secrets of magic, did not think he would be able to see this. The main hero suddenly realized. Some name surfaced strangely familiar, but he did not remember it because it was 500 years ago. At that moment, Bio turned to Bacon and asked what they would do now. Bacon asked again what he was even talking about, and then inquired what to do with the report for the guild. To this, the main hero gloomily said that everything was very bad. He thought that Beowulf was absolutely right. Suddenly, a monster appeared that no one had ever seen, and the alchemist immediately defeated it. Bacon thought that as soon as this became known, he would probably be called to the royal capital. A new day came. All the battles were already behind. They returned to the city. Someone called out to the hero and asked if he had a minute. He immediately turned around. The boy in the cloak said that lately there was talk of vacant everywhere, and he awkwardly stammered and asked who he was. The boy asked him again. Then he, smiling slightly, introduced himself as Tarask. Unlike the other, he was a simple alchemist. The hero recalled his previous encounters with this guy. Then the latter said he had just eaten moose, the simplest and cheapest ingredients one could find, and these memories made him uneasy. Bacon said he got the job thanks to him, so he sincerely thanked him for that time. Then Tarask said that now everyone was talking about him. The boy smiled very slyly and said he just wanted to ask a few questions to their new star. Then the main hero asked again, which exactly, and Tarask's gaze immediately changed. Tarask extended his hand to him and asked how he sees this world. Bacon was embarrassed by these words and did not know what to answer. The main hero said he did not understand the meaning of this question. Then Tarask added that he was simply curious to know the opinion of the alchemist. Bacon, an alchemist himself, sadly observed how those like him were treated. Alchemical culture had died, while magic began to flourish, and as an alchemist, he did not like it at all. But the main hero did not like his look, and in general, he was standing too close. Then Bacon began energetically waving his hands in front of him and said that they were not so different, he just did everything he could. Tarask was surprised by his words. After that, the boy asked again if he really meant that there were no complaints, to which the main hero nodded and replied that everything was fine. Tarask smiled kindly at him, mentally as if empty understood that he had not yet convinced him. Aloud he said that alchemists always do only one thing, to which that boy asked what exactly he meant. The main hero smiled slightly at him and calmly said that thanks to alchemy, they create a better future. Then Bacon, with a broad smile, asked Tarask if he thought the same, and added that all alchemists work for one goal. He blushed at this. At first he could not answer anything. Then the boy smiled and said that Vacant was right, everything was exactly so. They all sought to create a better future. Tarask turned to leave and told Vacant that he had a dream and would like to share it someday. That man thanked him for the conversation, and the main character did not expect this. He was confused and did not know what to say. Zosimos asked what he was going to say to him, and Vacant honestly replied that he had no idea at all. However, he reminded him of his old alchemist friends. The assistant agreed and said that he was a bit confused and radiated eccentricity, to which he replied that it was rude they could not be put on the same level. After some time, the main character held an envelope in his hands. A great surprise was visible on his face. He asked if he really received an invitation. In response, the sweet Shirley and the guild confirmed his words and added that this was an invitation from the king himself and the Royal Academy of Sciences. The main character sneered indifferently, said that he was not interested, and asked to throw it away. The girl said that it was impossible. She did not stop talking. One does not say no to a royal invitation, and he only asked her, saying that he was a simple petty adventurer and did not understand what they wanted from him. Shirley explained that she doubted whether a simple little traveler could really defeat the legendary monster that had not appeared since the founding of the country. That was exactly why he received the invitation. Vacant simply sighed. Other adventurers gathered around him and excitedly whispered that everyone had heard. He really accomplished another feat and even received an invitation to the capital. Getting an audience with the king is a great honor. Zosimos said that it all looked as if that professor in the capital was talking about him, and Bacon recognized his face and agreed with his assistant. He again turned to Shirley and said that he was actually not interested in going to the capital and asked if he could refuse the offer. But she firmly replied that it wouldn't work that way. They would pay for his carriage and hotel in the capital. The girl also warned that if he talked too much, they might slip him a carriage with iron bars, to which Bacon replied that that's exactly how criminals are transported, and he realized that arguing was pointless. He asked Shirley once more if the invitation extended to everyone who would come with him. She replied that accommodation would be paid for everyone he took with him, and they could even pay for guards. After some time, the main character went out into the city and looked very thoughtful. Zosim asked him what he was thinking about. To this, Bacon smiled and said he would take advantage of the situation and go on a trip with Theo. Recently, he had broken his promise to go to a party. Zosimos said that was very clever, to which the main character replied that there was one problem. The assistant immediately looked at him as if mentally asking a question. The hero explained that he had never invited a girl on an adventure before, to which Zosimos replied that he was a virgin, but Vaken ignored these words and said he had an idea. He showed his assistant a perfect plan, 6 steps to persuade the girl to go on a trip with him, the first of which was to create a pleasant atmosphere, and Bacon was wildly enthusiastic about this idea. The heroes thought that all of this was completely natural, and by no means strange. This was definitely the perfect plan. After some time, the hero reached Theo. She smiled gently, said his name, and was just about to rejoice at his return, but suddenly fell silent. Vaken jumped up to her, grabbed her by the shoulders, and suddenly said that they needed to set off on a trip together, and the girl was shocked by his words and simply asked him to repeat. After some time, the main character shouted, grabbed his head, and cursed because his perfect plan had failed. Zosimos also confirmed his words and said it was a complete failure, while Theo stood there not understanding what was happening. A few days later, they set off together. The girl was glowing with happiness, called him over, and said that there was a hot spring in the next town. The main character smiled and asked her if that was really true, then suggested stopping there to buy materials for alchemy. Zosimos turned to him and with a smile said that somehow they truly enjoy the trip to the capital, to which he replied that he was sincerely glad, then suddenly remembered Theo's and her father's reaction. Vaken said that Edgar had given his consent, so he was sincerely grateful to him, then added that perhaps they should thank the king for accepting this invitation. The hero exhaled. Zosimos said that an invitation from King Selari 500 years ago would have been a complete disaster. Vaken instantly recalled the past. When he was invited to meet the king of that time, he was filled with pride. But in the end it all boiled down to money and politics. King turned out to be a boring man who only offended him with his plans regarding alchemy. The aristocrats around him, where the Samathair alchemy was just a tool for their low, selfish goals. The main character then remembered his feelings. At that moment he felt only disgust, and he still remembers it clearly. At that moment Theo called him, asked if he was listening to her, then added, "Hot springs of beauty. These are hot springs of beauty." He replied that of course he was listening to her. The girl continued and said that even appearance becomes better if you immerse yourself in them, and if she immerses herself there, she will attract so many clients. The main character looked ahead and with a smile said that Theo was already very sweet. The girl was shocked by his words. Viken thought women instinctively crave beauty. 500 years ago orders for serums and beauty elixirs were pouring in, maybe make something for Theo too, but she blushed with shame at that moment. The main character asked her if she was troubled by seasickness, then added that it was strange the potion he prepared for her should not have stopped working for another day. Theo smiled and said everything was fine. When he complimented her, she felt as if her heart was about to jump out of her chest, and he added that if she needed more potion, he could give it in about 30 minutes, though he did not recommend it. Zosim flew up to the girl and told her to forgive her master for his foolish harshness. She laughed and replied that it was typical for Ken. The assistant flew closer to the main heroine and said she should know. He would not just be making compliments to a girl in such a new place. The main character decisively said he only spoke the truth. Theo was really very sweet and could quite possibly become a model. Then Zosimos asked him what he meant by the word cute, and he replied that he had no clear idea how to define female beauty. For him, an expressive face, cherry lips, a gentle gaze, brown eyes, and hair like sun rays were important. The main character could have talked for a long time, but what he liked largely depended on the person herself, and when it came to Theo, bias was quite real. Vaken said that he was actually very drawn to her, so he could not judge objectively. He ran his hand over his chin, a gentle smile appeared on his face, and he said, "If I say that Theo is sweet, then she really is sweet." The hero continued to think about this question. It was clear that he took it very seriously. At that moment, Theo, whose face had turned very red with embarrassment, said that he might not continue. Wacken glanced at her without turning his head. At first, the girl sat quietly, then hid her face in her palms. He also shifted his gaze to the road ahead. And suddenly it dawned on him that he had said all this right in front of Theo. At that moment, Zosimos thanked him for the detailed explanation. The boy immediately blushed and began to apologize to her. The girl looked at him with pain and asked if he had really lied. He stared at her in shock. Bacon turned away from her and sharply said no, adding that it was too honest, so he asked her to forget half of it, to which she replied that she would not do that. She pressed her hands to her face and shyly said that she was glad he had opened up to her about his feelings. He was still completely confused. A week passed, and Zosim told him that they would soon reach the capital, so they needed to prepare. They reached the royal capital Jury, and Theo said with admiration that it was beautiful here and the whole city was shining. She immediately suggested enjoying the capital and going shopping, to which the adult asked her about the king. Then Wacken grabbed her hand and, smiling, said that there was no problem, he was in no hurry to get involved in politics, and the king barely had time to meet with some alchemist. Theo argued, insisting that it was an audience with the king, and he coldly replied that he did not care. Just then the guards called him by name and asked what his name was. The lady greeted him and said that he would be escorted, His Majesty was already waiting. These words upset Wacken, and Theo wished him luck. After some time they finally reached the castle. The main character was led to the hall. The king of the kingdom of Juri, Janus III, and his subordinates were already there. Wacken greeted him and said that he had just arrived after finishing work. He introduced himself an alchemist named Wacken Ord. To this, one of the men in glasses said that opening your mouth without permission is impolite. To this, the one with the blank expression thought that introducing oneself earlier was considered good manners. He apologized aloud and asked to start over. Then the king, not taking his eyes off him, asked if it was true that he had so easily defeated the legendary monster. Wacken replied that this was not true at all. He thought to himself that the monster was by no means legendary, but a completely ordinary creature that appears according to a certain pattern. Then the king asked him if it was a rumor, and the main character sadly explained that, unfortunately, he lives in a remote village and does not know what people are talking about in the city. At that moment, one of the king's subordinates shouted loudly, "What disrespect, he doesn't even kneel before the king himself," and yet he answers with a cheeky smile. Wacken wondered, have the rules of politeness changed again? He honestly admitted that he came from a village and really does not understand etiquette very well. If he had been warned in advance, he would have at least prepared a little. In a moment, the main character fell to his knees on the floor, asked if everything was all right now, and all his subordinates looked at him in shock. The guy asked what he wanted from him. Wacken added that if he has any requests, he can turn to the Adventurers Guild, and it is there that the payment for his services will be decided. The king said he heard the main hero brewed and sold magical potions, and asked which potions he could make. The hero replied he could make many and asked which one was needed. After this, Wacken raised his head and looked at the king. The king was also looking at him, and at that moment the boy asked if perhaps he needed a potion for hair loss. These words terribly angered the king, and the main hero was thrown into prison. He ended up behind bars. Zosim stated that this was a complete failure. He hoped that his teacher would be executed quickly. To this, Wacken replied that he was in no hurry to die, he was simply focused on Krinto, and instantly understood what the people's problems were. The main character asked the assistant if he would come back for him to order the potion, to which the assistant replied that it would probably happen in about 3 days, but it was not certain that he would be released. Wacken said he did not want to sit here and suggested leaving. Zosimos asked how he planned to escape. The guy wondered if fast travel would help. He answered, no. The assistant suggested making a fuss, saying he was going to escape from prison, to which Bacon replied that it was of little use and it was better to approach the problem positively. Suddenly, a shining object appeared in his hands. The main character said he would brew the king a potion against hair loss, and then he would definitely forgive him. To this, Zosim replied that it was quite a mature answer, because he thought he wanted to kill everyone and escape, and the guy was outraged. Wacken added that he felt like it was not only his hair that troubled him, he was quite tired. Zosimos replied that in such a primitive era, there were no artificial fairies, so it was no wonder he was so tired. The main character said that in his time, everyone had their own artificial fairy. The assistant agreed and said that people lived better then. Then Wacken suggested making an artificial fairy for the king, to which Zosimos said, "Isn't that too much?" He thought the potion would be enough, and he agreed. After that he immediately started creating. At first the main character closed his eyes and folded his hands in front of his face, then suddenly opened his eyes and said that everything needed to be prepared. After some time the potion was finally ready, and Zosimos said with a smile that it was great news as befits such a master. The master himself smiled and asked if he was praising or criticizing him, and added that a couple more artifacts needed to be made. At that moment a soldier passed by, noticed that the main character was casting a spell, and asked what he was doing. The man asked with interest what kind of device it was and where he got it. The guy replied that he wanted to give this thing to the king as an apology and asked for help to deliver it, and the soldier wondered how he opened the door. Wacken said contemptuously that the lock was primitive and even any monkey could open it. He poured liquid metal into it and the lock broke. Then he asked the soldier if he would escort him to the king. Then the man raised his weapon and shouted angrily that it was his business to stop him. The protagonist said that he thought so. At that moment Bacon took one of his artifacts, threw it directly at the soldier's body, and immediately activated it. At first the man did not understand what was happening. Some murky, incomprehensible mass appeared on his gear, and then the armor began to rust. In a few seconds the man's body seemed to be exposed. He looked at it in surprise and asked what it was. The main character did not react at all to this. He addressed Zosmos and said that with this they would easily reach the king, and the assistant asked in surprise if he really got that artifact for this purpose. This thing was called Slime Agent Number 18, and 500 years ago it was insanely popular. As soon as you throw it, the slime instantly begins to multiply. It melts only the outer clothing, exposing the target, and also stimulates certain points. With its help, pranks were arranged, and very soon we were forced to somehow curb its use. At that moment, the soldier who was attacked asked again what it was, and then asked to remove it from him. The main character turned to him and said that he would not die from this, so do not worry, only the clothes and armor would be gone. Zosim said that if they had artificial fairies, they would easily free them, but they do not have such. Vakin only replied that they just need to keep going. The main character was walking through the castle corridors when he came across a bunch of soldiers. They said that they finally reached him and needed to call for reinforcements. Soon Vacona was surrounded by soldiers. They formed a tight circle and aimed their weapons at him, and he was a little surprised. Zosim asked what they would do fight, to which he replied that it was unnecessary. He had created a bunch of slime in reserve because he was sure he would not go unnoticed. The main hero stood calmly, and at that moment several soldiers decided to attack him, so he took out several vials of slime antidote number 18 and threw them at them. At first the soldiers seemed to notice nothing, but as soon as Vacant activated the potion, it instantly enveloped the men's armor, and they froze in surprise. Gradually the armor and other clothing began to dissolve. They asked what it was. The men continued to groan and make some incomprehensible sounds until they finally noticed that the slime was dissolving their clothes and asked about it aloud. Strange sounds continued to echo down the castle corridor, but no one even reacted to them. After some time, all the men lay stretched out at his feet, and he only glanced at them slightly. Suddenly Beacon scratched his cheek, got nervous, and said that this did not look very good. The assistant agreed with him. After that the main hero turned away and muttered that he did not want to look at the soaked men. Zosimos said that he was once again convinced he had no heart. The boy said that this was the best of the illegal artifacts. The assistant said that in that case one could simply use the artifact that changes appearance, to which Viking admitted that he had not thought of that, and at that moment the girl attacked him. He barely escaped. The stranger lunged at him several times with blows, but each time he dodged the attack lightning fast and then fell to the floor. The main character thought to himself, she is fast, completely unlike the other guards. He felt that someone strong was in front of him, and the girl said she found him, calling him by name. The stranger held a sword in her hands. She said she was ordered to execute him, so he needed to prepare. The main character raised his hands up in front of him, hesitated, and said that he had never hurt anyone. The girl did not react at all. She only barely changed her pose and calmly told him to prepare to die. It turned out that her name was Princess Guard Maya Fonti. Vacant tried to explain himself. He asked her to listen to him and said he just wanted to talk to the king. But she did not let him finish. She instantly rushed at him in anger, and he only managed to dodge at the last moment. The girl decisively said she would not allow him to approach the king, to which Bacon tried to explain that he had medicine for that person, and then Maya indignantly asked if he really wanted to poison him, calling him a villain. The main character skillfully dodged another blow. He landed on bent legs and resolutely said that she was one of those who do not listen. Bacon began to argue, passionately explaining that he just wanted the king to enjoy life, and she coldly cut him off, saying that he was clearly distributing forbidden substances. He asked again in shock. Maya Fanti said that he was dodging her attacks, and that meant he was definitely not an ordinary person. He replied that he was just a regular alchemist. Zosim asked if it was worth using artifacts, to which he replied that he could manage without them for now. The assistant asked why he acted that way since the girl fought seriously. Vacant agreed but hesitated with his answer. The main character began to say that if he fought seriously, she would get offended, and after defeat, she would hardly recover so easily. He also added that he did not want to resort to force, otherwise what impression would he make on the king? Maya clearly did not like this. The main heroine continued to say that she was a girl, and you don't treat the weaker sex like that. The girl was almost grinding her teeth in anger. Her anger reached the limit. She shouted at him that he was a bad person, and then asked if he underestimated her. The main heroine froze in shock. She really heard him. Maya shouted that she would kill him, that she would cut off his head. The boy thought that now she definitely would not listen to him. At that moment the girl rushed at him and delivered an extremely strong blow. He was a bit weakened, but his condition was normal, and Maya looked at him thinking that she had hit him with all her strength and he was still alive. Zosimo said that he had to use a weapon, to which he replied, "It's okay, I was defending myself, not attacking," and the assistant remarked that it was a strange rule. Zosimo said that he really would have to defend himself, so maybe it was time to give in and use the rest of the artifacts, but that man replied that he would like to avoid further fighting, and he thought to himself that this could be used. In his head, he was already picturing how the potion would affect Maya, and his face reddened a little. At that moment, the assistant shouted that it seemed he was thinking about something bad, and he asked him to be quiet because there was nothing bad about it. While he was talking with Zosmos, the girl attacked him again, saying that you can't get distracted in a fight, and he barely managed to avoid the attack at the last moment. Once she managed to knock him off his feet, he fell. She said he was caught. When he was falling, he confusedly threw a vial of potion at her. She cut the vial, but it still hit the target. After a few moments, her armor suddenly began to dissolve along with her clothes, and she, shocked, asked, "What is this?" The main hero swore a little when he saw the scene before him. Zosmos said that, of course, this was not what he wanted, and said it very sarcastically. Maya Fanti continued to fight against everything. She had almost no clothes left, but she said it was quite lustful, after which she asked if he really thought that would defeat her. He said he was not going to defeat her. She herself broke the test tube, shouted "shut up" at him, and rushed at him. Suddenly she felt something. Vakin warned her not to twitch too much. She again asked him to shut up and added that it would not stop her. But with every step she became more and more uncomfortable. The guy said it was because she was moving so much, and if she calmed down, she would feel better like the other guards. Maya Fanti said she now understood where all the guards had gone, and asked not to underestimate her. After all, she was the princess's guard. The girl tried various moves and techniques and resolutely said, whatever happens, she will protect the king's life. But her strength was also exhausted. Zosima said it was strange few can withstand the slime, and the main heroine agreed, she really is a strong girl. At that moment, Bacon threw out that even someone like her has a limit. He approached her. Then he lightly poked her in the forehead. Her eyes instantly opened wide, all because the slime increased her sensitivity. The main heroine said that no matter how much she restrained herself, her whole body had now become very sensitive to external influences. Zosima told him that he was a real devil, to which the guy replied that he could look at her a little longer. The assistant was silent for a moment, then asked if he really should tell Theo about this. The main hero immediately remembered the girl and froze. After this, Bacon sharply said that he had to leave here. Zosima said that he had over 60 words in his dictionary by which he could now be described. The boy asked not to say anything. After some time they left the castle, and the main character said in surprise that they got out surprisingly easily, to which the assistant replied that if the castle had been prepared for an attack by a villain, it would have withstood it. Zosima said that both the captain of the royal guard and even the prime minister are still writhing with pleasure. Then the main character said that he at least managed to give the king the elixir and had already deactivated the activation code of that slippery potion, so it can be considered that everything is fine. Then Bacon said it was time to return to Fiathi. We're running late, and the assistant just shrugged and said he had always known how to ignore responsibility. After some time, they reached the hotel on Tuesday. Theo smiled and greeted them. She asked how everything went. The main character smiled kindly at her and said that, of course, everything went completely without any problems. The girl asked how it was for him in the castle, and he sank into thoughts, recalling all the events that had happened. After that, the boy came out of his thoughts, nervously began scratching his face, and said that he was nervous, so he did not remember everything very well. The main heroine thought that the king looked way too kingly. She laughed and asked what was so strange about that. Bacon abruptly changed the subject and suggested instead to go shopping, then apologized for making her wait. She, noticing his fatigue, advised him to rest a little. The main character smiled warmly at her and said that as long as he was nearby, the fatigue would disappear. The girl became shy again. Her face turned red, she even began to tremble. Vacant did not understand what was happening, and it was then that Zosima said that it was good. Finally, they went outside, and Theo asked if they should go to a restaurant, to which he replied that it was his personal idea. A smile blossomed on her face. The girl said that they should go to the seafood and vegetable bistro, Akechi. Bacon said that sounded wonderful, and then they held hands. The main character blushed from this gesture. Theo began to giggle. He asked her what she was doing, and she replied that it was strange that at their first meeting she had shouted at him. Vakin agreed with her and added that she had also hit him. Memories of their first meeting flooded him. The main character said that although it was not long ago, it seemed as if they had known each other for an eternity. He giggled, and the girl closed her eyes and agreed she felt the same. Later they returned to the hotel. It was getting dark, and the main character sat in the room, not taking his eyes off the diagram. Zosima said that writing on paper is quite old-fashioned, and asked Vakin if he had forgotten about his artificial fairy. Vakin replied that it was easier to design her when drawing on paper. The main character said that he was creating an artificial fairy named Alina for Theo, and his face shone with a happy smile. Support artifact artificial fairy. She is a tool that significantly improves people's lives. Zosima, created by Vakin, had a completely different purpose. She has her own artificial intelligence, and if necessary, other artificial fairies can also express emotions, think, and speak. Zosim listened to the speech and said that he understood everything. She was his younger sister. Then the main character asked him if that made him happy. His assistant said that it was quite a complicated question. He asked him how to name that mixture of anxiety and excitement. The hero pondered the question, and after a moment guessed, maybe this is what excitement is called. Zosim said he understood everything, but it seemed that he was simply happy. He needed advanced alchemical equipment, to which Vakin replied that as long as the towers of the wise stand, the equipment will be found. Veal approached the main hero, placed her hands on his shoulders, and asked what he was doing. The boy gently grabbed her wrists and pressed her to himself. He whispered to her that it was a secret he didn't want to spoil the surprise. The girl replied that it was no longer a surprise. Vakin answered that it would still remain a surprise because she would wait with great interest. A new day came. The sun shone brightly outside the window. Pleasant sounds came from one of the rooms in the hotel. The main hero woke up, scratched his head, and asked who was knocking on his room door. He was told it was the hotel owner, Chu S1. Vakin opened the door to the man, said that someone had asked to see him, then inquired if he had a minute, to which the man asked who it could be. The man said the visitor was a girl from the Imperial Guard. Her name was Maya Fanti. Vakin became worried as soon as he heard this. After some time, the main hero approached her with an awkward smile, called her by name, and asked if she really needed something. At his words, the girl grimaced so that it became clear she did not want to see him at all, and even called him by name. The main hero smiled widely at her and said that the motto of the alchemists is "Let's make the world better," then added that he was one of the alchemists and his name was Vacant Ord. Maya looked at him in shock, her face reflecting deep fatigue from all this. The boy laughed, and Zosim said that he reminded him of a pseudo-religious guru. The girl simply gave up, sighed heavily, and said that the king was calling him again. He was shocked by these words. The main character said that he had to refuse, he was leaving tomorrow morning, and Maya exclaimed indignantly that this was a challenge issued by the king himself. Then Vacant said that it was time for him to return, there was nothing more for him to do here, and the girl again said that it was a challenge from the king. The hero thought to himself, she clearly would not listen to him. Aloud he said that he was generally careless. What if she said something else, and he would be put in prison again? The girl instantly remembered how he had treated her. Her face turned red. She said that she also did not want to come here, but had to bring him to the castle. Then Maefanti said that thanks to the potion the main character had prepared for the king decided to cover up what he had done in the castle. Vacant said that no formalities were needed for the potion, but if you really need to just say, thank you. The girl replied no, and added that he must come to the castle tomorrow morning. The main character thought that this was all tyranny, hated the people in power, and loudly said that he would come. Maya Fanti turned to leave the room. Arna said that they were waiting for him tomorrow, he must come. The main character felt that he had caused them a lot of trouble, and now they were calling him there again. The assistant only said that he understood him. Then Vakanya made a funny grimace and said that next time, when he escaped from prison, he would not hold back. At that moment, an interesting thought flashed through the main character's mind. Were they all strange there? And he clung to how he treated them. After this, Bacon smiled slyly and said that this was great news this time. He would prepare 3,000 in advance. After this, his face turned red. He even stuck out his tongue in anticipation and said that Maya Fanti would get the worst of it. Zosim said that saliva was dripping from his mouth. He was clearly a bad person. The boy asked in surprise if that was true. At that moment, the protagonist saw how Maya Fanti suddenly fell to her knees and trembled. She turned to him with tears in her eyes and said she would kill him, and he quietly cursed under his breath. A new day came. The protagonist, as promised, came to the royal castle, and there were many people again. Vacant and the king looked at each other, and neither made a sound. The others were silent as well. After this, the king said that first of all he needed to know no one would ask him about yesterday's behavior, and the boy was surprised. Then the hero thanked him for understanding. After this, the man in glasses said that they needed to talk about the potion, thanks, and the reward for it in an envelope. The king joined their conversation and unexpectedly said that now he wanted to discuss the future. The protagonist was surprised by his words. The man said that after the previous incident, everyone already knew he was a skilled alchemist. If he had been an agent of another country, their state would have been destroyed that day. The protagonist thought to himself that he had never thought about it, and aloud said that such a possibility was possible. The man in glasses noticed this, emphasized the words, and said that they had taken it into account. He pointed a finger at Wacken and said that they had decided to invite him to work in the castle. The protagonist immediately asked him. The man in glasses proclaimed that from now on behalf of the king himself, he would oversee the development of alchemy in their country, and those present immediately burst into joyful applause. To this, the main character suddenly asked, "What am I supposed to do if I don't want to?" The people around froze with their mouths open. At that moment, the guards surrounded him again. They held spears in front of them, ready to attack at any moment, and again they called him by name. The man in glasses said that the main character was very strong and very dangerous, they could not allow him to fall into foreign hands. The man added that precisely because of this, they had to do everything properly, and Bacon asked him if they really thought he could be controlled, upon which he was surprised. The main character said that his alchemy was truly needed by someone, and added that if he had not escaped from prison, he would have attracted attention. To this, Manning's glasses replied that precisely because of this, they wanted to engage in alchemy. They wanted to create a government body that would be subordinate to the law. The protagonist said that lying was not allowed. In this country, there were no laws controlling alchemy and alchemists, and there were not even rules regarding the sale or distribution of potions made by hand. The man, noticeably nervous, said that this was because they did not have an expert, and Bacon added that they very much wanted him to create the law he deemed necessary. After that, the main character said that he could not continue the conversation. He treated them with respect but refused to take part in it. At that moment, one of the king's close aides ran up from the side, aimed a spear at him, and asked if he really understood nothing. The soldier continued to say that he could not ignore His Majesty the King, then turned to Wacken. Shouldn't they just cut off his head right here and now? No matter how powerful his artifacts were, there were many of them, and they would manage. The main character decisively said that with such a number of people, they would not be able to stop him, and the soldier was stunned by these words. After that, Wacken addressed the king directly and asked if this soldier was acting on his orders. The king himself was even surprised by such a question. Then the king got nervous. He turned to the main character and told him to wait. His soldier just had a hot temper. But the soldier paid no attention to these words. He said he was no longer going to tolerate it. This man was dangerous for the kingdom, so this evil had to be eradicated. The main character sternly warned him. If he did not obey and tried to kill him, he would be forced to treat him as a villain. Wacken added that the soldier was clearly much more evil than him, and these words really angered the soldier. The man instantly threw in the main character's face that he was a bad person, then swung a weapon at him. At that moment, the boy used activation again. And then slime appeared on the soldier's body, which began to corrode his clothes and armor. The soldier did not understand at all what it was or what was happening. The hero explained, "This was potion number 18, slime, nothing terrible. The soldier just would not be able to move for some time, but probably he knew that himself." The soldiers watching this were shocked. One of them shouted angrily that he had started doing this again. At the same moment, the clothes on the first soldier's body almost completely disappeared. He only made strange sounds that clearly confused the other guards. The main character rose from his knees, closed his eyes, and calmly said that they were no better than bandits. Everything is decided by bad deeds. After that, Wacken turned around and said that the conversation was over. He was leaving. The king tried to stop him, calling him by name. The hero did not turn around upon hearing his voice, simply told the man to control the people around him. He also said that alchemy brings people closer to a happy future, and it cannot be used only for personal gain. The king was embarrassed by his words, but there was a feeling that he himself understood something. Zosim asked if the effect of the drug could be removed from the commander of the guard, Gertie, to which Wacken replied, "Let him lie down a little longer. He definitely will not die." A week later, they returned home and immediately headed to the tavern Dancing Duck. Fio smiled and told her father that they were home. The man immediately approached them, greeted them with a smile on his face, and asked how their trip went. Fio laughed and said it was very fun. They bought a bunch of souvenirs. The man asked them to show, and at that moment Wacken wondered how he managed here without his daughter. He replied that China helped him. The latter greeted him. It was the same girl who was locked in the mirror dimension. He immediately saw scenes from the past in his memory when he saved her. He said aloud that he was glad her health was fine. The girl smiled and thanked him, then added that she was already just like a cucumber. Bacon said he was happy for her. Phil also thanked the girl for helping her father. China said there was no need to thank, and that they definitely needed to rest now they had just arrived. Theo smiled and said that she definitely would not refuse such an offer, after which she took the hero's hand and added that they would go upstairs to have some tea. Here Bacon and the girl suddenly understood something, and the father, who was strangely looking at them, asked, "What happened? Have they really become so close? When did they even manage that?" To this, Theo cautiously turned around and said that he definitely imagined it. China came to their aid and explained that it was quite logical they had just returned from a trip. The man agreed with her with an empty look and sighed. He immediately jumped up to the main hero and said that when they drink together, he would definitely tell him everything. The boy was shocked by his words. The main hero blushed. He tensed up because of the whole situation. The only way out for him was simply to agree. After some time, Bacon and the man found themselves in a bar. Glasses with drinks stood before them, and while his father was talking to him, the boy thought that tomorrow morning he would feel sick again. The next morning the hero woke up exhausted and with a hangover. He sat with his head in his hands, his face pale. The artificial village seemed to remind him that the master had drunk 3 times more than allowed, and the young man only replied that he remembered. He did not regret it at all. The night of drinking with Edgar was worth it, because finally they were able to have a good time together. The system noted that it would never understand when a person puts instant pleasure above health. Ken pointed to the boxes with bottles and said that he managed not only to have fun, but also to work. He made several boxes of potions. The fairy reproachfully noted that even tipsy, the alchemist knows how to brew magical drinks. The hero added that they worked a little in the workshop, and soon he would be able to prepare even more. Suddenly Maya appeared right in front of him. She approached the boy with a request. The boy immediately understood what exactly the princess, who knelt before him, desired. He asked what she was doing in such a remote place. Ken noticed how the royal person knelt down and realized, this is how one should bow, and his previous actions were a mistake. The girl solemnly addressed the horde. Maya said that by the order of His Majesty she would serve the hero. The young man knew nothing about the royal decision, and hastily declared that he had not been informed. The girl pulled out a letter, and the boy immediately unfolded it. He read that the king wanted to apologize for his arrogant ignorance, so to prove sincerity, he decided to send his daughter to Ken. His Majesty wrote that Maya was a wonderful knight. Moreover, the girl was educated, so she could be useful to him, and Jean hoped that Ken would eventually be able to love Jury. The letter ended there. After reading, the young man had no choice but to ask the princess to return home. Maya was outraged. The boy explained that he did not want to have anything to do with the royal family. The girl said she could not return to the castle. She honestly admitted that she was sent to seduce and recruit the hero. The young man remarked that she should not always be so honest. He began to walk away, and the girl rushed to stop him. She said that Ken could not leave her like that. The princess reminded him of the dirt he had caused her. Now, because of this, no one would marry her. The young man suddenly remembered how he sent slime to Maya. It wrapped around her body and did not let her move. He sincerely apologized for this and mentally recalled that the king called the girl his daughter. The man asked if Maya belonged to the royal family, and the girl bitterly explained that she was the daughter of a concubine. So many in the palace did not accept her. She added that it was precisely because of this that they decided to send her as a sacrifice. Ken asked not to call the plan to seduce him a ritual murder. He decisively said that he had already made his decision. The young man had already accepted the apology and was even ready to help if needed, but he did not need an assistant. He asked the girl to return home. Maya was not going to back down. She suddenly approached the hero and asked how many more times she had to repeat that she would not return. Ken, under unexpected pressure, could not answer anything. The girl trembled and began to mutter something uncertainly. She slowly ran her hands over her body and with a sly smile said that the boy could punish her if she was disobedient. The young man understood what she really wanted and froze in horror. Maya asked him not to think badly of her and not to call her names, but then suddenly changed her mind and began to ask him to scold her even more. Ken shouted that he did not want to do any of that. He could not understand how it all happened. The artificial fairy explained that it happened because the gentleman took drug number 8, which awakened a new fetish in Maya. Ken turned to the princess, asked her to calm down, and reminded her that she was from the royal family, so it was unbecoming for her to behave that way, otherwise she would be condemned. The girl did not want to listen to him and said that social norms were already dead to her. Nothing restrained her anymore. The young man was shocked and did not know what to do with the princess. Hearing the noise, Fio came out to the boys. She asked Ken if they had a client. Ken replied that it was their regular weirdo. Fio did not understand why he said that. The princess smiled at the tavern owner's daughter and introduced herself, Maya von Jury, the new assistant of Vacant's Pleasures. Fio was confused, so the hero advised her not to take this girl seriously. She only sows misunderstanding by her appearance. Maya looked around and asked if this was their workshop and if there was a tavern here. Fio confirmed this, and the princess asked if they could prepare a room for her. The owner's daughter gladly agreed. Maya said she would stay for a long time and handed over a whole bag of money. Fio's eyes immediately lit up. The girl took the payment and instantly rushed to prepare everything. The princess, pleased that she would now live with the hero, slyly smiled at Ken, while Ord was thinking about how to get rid of her. 10 days had passed since the princess moved into the dancing duck. Together with Ken, they worked in the garden, picking apples. The young man asked the girl when she would go home. Maya replied that she was not going anywhere. She reminded him that she was not useless. She helped him collect alchemical materials. The boy sighed wearily. He realized that the girl was serious about being his guardian, and it made him nervous. Vaken turned to the princess and emphasized that he already has a beloved Fio. The girl dropped to one knee and quietly replied that she knows. Maya declared with an admiring look that she does not intend to be his beloved, she wants to be a servant and a tool for his pleasure. The boy shuddered upon seeing that look again. It meant punishment awaited, and he said he would never understand her. The girl still looked at him with a languid gaze. The boy advised her to return to the capital. The princess burst into a scream. She would not return and demanded that the hero continue insulting her. Ken was already tired of her and sighed heavily. Maya noticed that lately Mr. Vaken only gathers herbs and fulfills orders for healing potions. She asked if he really did not intend to hunt monsters and conquer the labyrinth. She thought she would be much more useful if he allowed her to use her sword skills. The hero thoughtfully examined the fruit in his hand. He replied that because of her he could not do that. Ken asked her what would happen if she, as a princess, got hurt next to him. From such caring words, Maya's body seemed to be in debt. Her face reddened, her mouth filled with strength. She muttered that the gentleman suddenly became so kind, while the hero, on the contrary, reacted irritably. Ken really wanted to do something. He considered whether to go to the labyrinth. The girl immediately lit up with joy. She decisively said she would go there with the hero, but he was categorically against it. The princess asked why he would not allow her, and the young man replied that he would go there on behalf of the guild to which he belonged. And Maya's bed did not belong to the guild. Ken could not take her with him. He asked her to be obedient and stay at home. The artificial fairy enthusiastically praised the gentleman. Zosimo's thought the princess would definitely back down. The boy thought so too. Then he could calmly enter the labyrinth alone. Suddenly Maya handed him a folded scrap of paper. The hero carefully unfolded it and asked what it was. The girl quietly replied that she had been prepared for this. The boy read and understood that the princess was already registered in the guild, and even in the same group as Ken, after which he was covered in cold sweat. The girl smiled and said that their team was called Snail Lovers Club, and the hero shouted indignantly that it was a very strange name and asked when it was even possible to drag a person into a group without their permission. The princess replied that they were ghosts of the royal family. The young man said that the guild was run by monkeys, and the boy was not ready to accept it. Seeing how the master was confused, Maya, with eyes full of expectation, asked if he would punish her. Ken trembled because he could do nothing with the princess. The fairy said that this time the young man had completely lost. Suddenly the system roared, "There is a battle on the western path." The hero ordered Zosima to monitor the situation, and the fairy whispered that there is one man and a strong monster there. The young man could not understand how in a place that usually had few monsters and was relatively safe, such a creature could appear. The hero awakened his powers and said that they were heading their way. Ken handed Maya a bottle and ordered her to drink. The girl asked what it was, and the alchemist replied that it was a speed potion allowing one to run about 10 meters in 10 seconds. The young man handed one bottle to the princess and one to himself. Before taking a sip, he said that the goal of alchemy is to help people, and Ken advised them to hurry. He sharply told Zosima to lead them by the shortest route. The artificial system plotted the route and told the guys to move forward. After some time, they came across a giant monster looming over the wounded boy and holding the elbow of his severed arm. The hero saw such a monster for the first time, so he guessed whose new species it was. He ordered the fairy to find out everything about the enemy. The princess shouted for the boy to be more careful and vigilant. Ken shouted to the girl, "Protect the victim." The girl instantly rushed to the boy. The boy was about to deal with the monster. He created circles around himself from which magical swords emerged. They rushed straight at the monster, but he was indifferent to the attacks. The swords exploded when they touched his body, yet he still remained alive. The young man did not understand why he could not harm him. The fairy confessed that she was still rummaging through the archives in search of information about this creature. Then she said that this monster was called the Beast of Hatred. She found mentions of it in records that were 500 years old. The hero's attacks only made the beast angrier and more incited. They wanted to strike the hero, but he managed to dodge, and the blow hit the ground. Ken shouted that it was impossible for him not to know about this monster because he had studied the entire archive. The monster continued to strike from all sides. The boy realized, if it were not for the speed potion he drank, he would already be dead. Ken felt that he needed greater strength. He was going to attack the enemy until he found its weak spot, and the young man created magical blades of all elements, which swirled in the air around him. He threw discs at the monster, who fiercely defended itself. Its long and strong arms broke the hero's blades, but the young man did not stop throwing them. The monster did not give up. While it was distracted, the boy pulled out the alchemist's staff and jumped, swinging he was going to destroy the enemy with one blow, and Ken hit the monster, cutting it in half. Although the boy won, he knew that such a monster needed to be studied. Suddenly, Maya's anxious voice distracted him. The young man approached her. The girl was sitting next to the boy's body. The princess said bitterly that they were late. The boy did not move. His eyes were closed. Ken sat next to the body and advised the girl not to take her eyes off him. He said that now he would show her what true alchemy of the future could lead to. A magical disc appeared in the hero's hands. Various artifacts materialized around the alchemist, and a huge goblet grew before him, into which he threw magical items. Then the artifacts seemed to melt in the cup, but the hero saved them. He attached the magical items to the disc he held in his hand. A stone appeared from the disc, and the young man pulled it out. Ken raised his hands up. His power and artifacts merged into one, and the hero locked them in a small sphere. Without touching the stone, the boy squeezed a drop out of it with magic, and it splattered right on his head. Then light shone around him. The boy came to life, opened his eyes, and looked around in surprise. Maya and Ken were glad he was okay. After some time, the heroes rode through the forest. The princess was amazed and fascinated by Mr. Wacken's alchemy, and the boy thanked her and said that now she could return home and tell the king about the possibilities of magic. Maya confidently said she would stay by his side. Ish wanted him to help people. The boy was not thrilled, and he came up with an idea. The alchemist suggested that the knight explain exactly what he had just done, and the girl did not object. Then an avalanche of information overwhelmed Maya. The hero said he used the elixir La Messia, explained in detail what it was and how he mastered this skill, and even mentioned the concept of the Nebral third-generation device. From the flow of new information, the girl's eyes opened wide. When the boy finished and asked if she understood everything, Maya could not utter a word. She was simply exhausted. Zosimo's replied that the gentleman was pure evil. The boy smiled slyly. This was not yet at the level of a knight, but spending time with Maya, he noticed. Although she was from the royal family, she worked for the people, and he sincerely considered her a good person. He realized that His Majesty had his own goals and views that the hero might not understand or accept, but Ken believed that it was precisely thanks to Maya that he decided to give this country a chance. The fairy noticed that the gentleman had become more mature in his judgments. When the knight and the alchemist returned to the tavern, the knight was already lying down. On the table before Ken was the defeated monster, and the hero could not comprehend what kind of creature it was. Without internal organs, with incomplete metabolism, and skin as if made of nettle. The young man looked closely at the monster's jaws and immediately understood. It was a predator. There was no tongue in the jaw, so the fangs were its weapon, and although the skeleton at first resembled a human's, the tail and paws revealed the animal. Ken realized that this was not a creature of nature. He asked Zosimo's to find more information about that monster. The fairy fulfilled the request, but no matter how much she searched, the result was always the same. Suddenly, screens appeared before the boy with various documents and articles, and Zosimo's noticed information from the sage of the Modus dynasty. Although they were blurred, they were strangely accurate. The hero read them and asked the fairy what she thought about it. Everything he saw and read seemed strange to him, as if something did not add up here. Ken noticed that since the first appearance of the monster, there was no more information about it. He concluded that the monster could have been the cause of the fall of the Modus dynasty. The fairy reminded him that this was only a guess, and they needed to learn more about the history of the beast. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. The princess approached him and, worried, said that she had already informed the palace about the monster and found out that they had some records about it. This was exactly what the hero needed. He asked if he could look at them. Maya said it would be difficult because the records were a royal secret. The young man ordered Zosimo's to find out where the royal archive was and how to get there. The fairy promised to find the castle plan in the database. Maya hesitated for a moment, but still decided to find out something from the master. She suddenly asked who this Bacon really was. The boy did not expect such a question, got confused, nervous, and answered that he was an alchemist. The girl expected the hero to answer exactly that, and said that such an answer did not satisfy her. The boy saw how Maya looked at him, a gaze full of doubts and anxiety, and he was not sure he could deceive her. The princess asked to be understood correctly, and added that no matter what happened, her loyalty to him would not change. Ken casually asked if she was refusing the seduction. The hero apologized for asking again, and wondered why she wanted to know so much. Maya was embarrassed. She wanted to know everything about the man she loved, and for her, it was quite natural. The alchemist did not expect to hear a confession from the knight. He glanced at the fairy and whispered what he should do. Zosimo said that the lord behaved pitifully. Suddenly, Maya turned to the magical creature. The girl asked in surprise why she looked like that and what artificial fairy meant. Zosimo's replied that she was an assistant of Vacant, who was a type of artifact. The young man mentally noted that the fairy acted very cunningly and cleverly. Maya hesitantly said that she had already guessed. It was the hero's turn to confess, and feeling this, he objected, saying that he had not even properly told his beloved anything about himself, and the girl smiled with interest and joy. Suddenly the knight approached the young man and said that, having learned his secrets, she would be one step ahead as his wife. The boy immediately began to object, not understanding what was happening, and asked if Maya wanted to make him punish her in this way. The princess said that when her father treated her mother cruelly, she thought she would never be able to love a man, but as soon as she met that gentleman, love instantly overwhelmed her. Finally, the girl sighed and apologized. She said everything she wanted, so she was going to leave. Before leaving, Maya asked him to forget everything. She admitted that she just wanted to be honest with the one she loved, and that was all. Such openness and sincerity moved the hero, and he changed his mind. He stopped the princess. Ken said he could not reveal the details but admitted he had truly been reborn. The princess looked at the young man in surprise. The hero's gaze became both serious and sad at the same time. Ken said that he was a man from the times of a Modus dynasty, an alchemist who lived 500 years ago. Meanwhile, Tarask sat on the cold mountain. The insult from Ken was eating him up, but despite this, he acknowledged the hero's truth. Tarask agreed. Alchemists truly strive to create a bright future, but he wanted the young man to remember one thing. The boy's face twisted with rage and bitterness. His eyes darkened, was about to remind Vacant of all his sins. When Maya learned the truth that the gentleman had been reborn, she asked again in surprise. The young man confirmed and explained that due to certain circumstances, he had overslept for 500 years, and although he looked young, he was actually 40. The girl agreed and noted that Ken was surprisingly calm for his age. Now the princess knew who he really was, and the boy asked if she felt better. The fairy flew up to her master. She asked if the gentleman was sure about what he was doing. He did not understand what Zosmos was talking about because she did not stop him. Maya, understanding everything, smiled. She was glad that Ken opened up to her and thanked him. The boy nodded and suddenly thought that maybe he just needed someone to listen to him. The alchemist confessed to the knight that he also felt lighter and sincerely thanked him. At that moment, Maya's true nature burst out. She asked if this secret was now just between the two of them, and Ken hesitantly replied that she must keep it. Looking at the princess, the boy asked in surprise where her seriousness had gone, and the girl insisted on her point and sharply asked if he could date someone if he was actually 40 years old. The young man corrected her slightly. In his previous life, he had not yet turned 40, so now he was somewhere around 30. From this news, Maya had a nosebleed. The boy did not understand why the girl reacted that way and immediately called her behavior unacceptable. The knight seemed to ask to be scolded even more. A few days later, when everyone was ready, Ken unexpectedly announced that he wanted to go to his hometown, surprising everyone. The hero himself explained that he planned to work not in the village, so he decided to visit the city at the same time. Theo and Maya approached the young man and enthusiastically said they would go with him. The boy tried to refuse them, warning that the road would be long and dangerous, and the artificial fairy sided with the owner and added that monsters would be encountered along the way. Theo confessed that she wanted to see the place where her beloved lives. Ken felt her feelings and pondered and knew that Maya would stand up for herself, but he doubted about Theo. Suddenly, Zosim outran the master and agreed to take the girl on a journey. Ken did not expect this. Theo shone with happiness and tightly hugged the fairy, while the hero grumbled in his mind that Zosim should be helping him, not taking away the love of his girl. The boy had no choice, had to turn to Edgar for help. The man laughed and said the boy was old enough to want to go home. He asked Ken to take the girls with him. Edgar asked to send his greetings to his parents. The boy froze at these words. The hero could not tell them the truth. His parents had long since died, but for Theo it was a great opportunity to see Midas. The boy wanted his beloved to have a chance to know his true self. Watching the girl play with the artificial fairy, Kina was overcome with doubts. He was not sure if Theo would accept him upon learning the truth, since modern people might consider him a living dead man. Maya told Via that first thing tomorrow morning they would go to the market and prepare for the journey. Via beamed with joy, and the hero thoughtfully looked into the night and thought that perhaps with the princess's help they could have a wonderful time. Maya noticed that the gentleman was looking at her and blushed. She jumped up with excitement. Ken finally smiled and agreed to take the girls with him. Theo confessed that she was curious to find out what her beloved's hometown would be like. Their journey lasted 3 days, and when the heroes finally arrived, the artificial fairy joyfully announced that they had arrived, but ahead stretched only an empty wasteland. The girls were confused. Maya asked Zosimos if she was sure they were in the right place, and the fairy replied that the city was underground. Zosmos flared up, the ground trembled beneath the heroes. The fairy opened access to the emergency evacuation exit, and when the extra stones and buildings collapsed, the boys saw a single stone entrance before them. Inside, spiral stairs awaited them, leading down. The young man began to descend first, followed by the girls. The fairy apologized, saying they wanted to make an elevator, but nothing worked out, and the hero said that this was even better than Rex. Zosimos agreed with the owner, and reported that so far no problems with ventilation or lighting had been found. Theo asked her beloved where they were heading. The hero explained that they were heading to the ruins of the city of Modus. The girl asked again, aren't they heading to his hometown? The young man replied that it would take a long time to explain, and added that Modus was definitely his hometown. Candles lit up in the corridor, and driving the boys out with light, they revealed a view of the city lying in ruins. Ken welcomed the girls to the city of Modus. Maya said that the landscape, as if painted with gold and silver, took her breath away, and the boy noted that everything did not look so majestic much had collapsed. Theo looked at Modus with a smile. She admitted that she considered this city unreal and fairy tale-like. The young man heard this. He approached her and asked again. The girl said that their people have a famous fairy tale, the Golden City of Modus. Ken asked the fairy about it, but she did not know. Zissimos asked Theo to tell them that story. The artificial fairy was going to record the narrator's voice and save it in the archive. The girl admitted that she would be embarrassed. Zissimos explained that the recording would be played every night, like a bedtime story, and Theo did not mind. She began to tell. Once Dill was a young boy in a village, and his younger sister was seriously ill. He worked every day to buy her medicine, but the girl was getting worse and worse. The boy decided to take her to the golden city of Modus to the wizards, whom a traveler once told him about. He knew, for help they would demand treasures and obedience. But no alchemist agreed to help the young man. All refused, because he brought too little money and treasures. Although the sorcerers were already bathing in countless riches, they still wanted more gold and silver. The boy stood confused and did not know what to do. The young man found himself on the street with his sick sister in his arms when he fell into despair. Someone noticed him. Having listened to the young man to the end, he only smiled. This smile was kinder than any wizard in the city. The man extended his hand and said that the boy was lucky to meet him. As soon as the alchemist said this, he immediately waved his wand and cast a spell on the poor girl. Her body began to shine. She immediately felt completely healthy. The girl could jump and run again, and she felt much better. Then the young man sincerely thanked the wizard and asked why he was so kind to them. Before answering, the wizard took off the hood from his cloak. The alchemist smiled and replied that it was important for him always to be kind to people. Then he turned into the wind and disappeared, and the sister and brother were grateful and decided to live by his example. When Phil finished the story, the fairies and the hero suddenly understood everything. The girl added at the end that it was a famous fairy tale known to everyone in the Jewish community, and she was surprised that Ken had not heard of it. He hesitantly agreed. Suddenly Zissimos said that the wizard from that story was a master. Theo did not understand what she meant and asked how Ken could be connected to that story. The artificial fairy took the boy. He was a wizard. She said that in this distorted city of gold and silver, greed had flourished, and there were almost no good people left. The boy approached his beloved and apologized to her for not telling her anything. Theo still did not understand what he was talking about. The boy confessed that he was a man who lived 500 years ago. Seeing the question in the girl's eyes, Ken explained that he was born a very long time ago. To everyone's surprise, the young man Theo suddenly lit up with a smile. For her, it was stunning. Now she understood why her beloved knew so much. Seeing that Maya was not surprised, the girl asked if the princess already knew about the secret. She boasted that she found out about it earlier than Theo. The girl pouted and said she was jealous of her. She asked if recently the princess and Ken had been close. The boy said that although it sounded incredible, he was on Theo's side. The hero asked his beloved if the news that he was 500 years older than her had not pushed her away, and Theo smiled gently and replied that she did not care. Her lineage always remains the same. She came closer and pressed her forehead to his. The girl admitted that she was surprised to learn that her boyfriend turned out to be a wizard from a fairy tale, but it was precisely because of this that she loved the story even more. Maya watched the couple with a smile, as if waiting for something. The artificial fairy drew the gentleman's attention to this and asked if he would embrace her too. The young man replied that there was no need for that. He revealed what the girl was experiencing. She felt like a miserable knight who was ignored, and she liked it. The boy advised Zissimos to look at the princess's face, who was restraining herself as much as she could in front of Theo. The fairy sighed and agreed that Maya had already been rewarded. The trembling knight said that she was the Lord's servant, so there were no problems for her. She was a warrior. Suddenly Ken called her to himself, stretched out his hand, and said that since she knew his secret, she was now part of the family. Maya and Theo approached the young man together and hugged him, smiling cheerfully. The heroes moved deeper into the ruins of the city. The princess noticed that no matter how far they went, all the streets were covered with gold. The young man said that alchemists of that time could get rich when they learned to transfer gold. He added that there was so much of that precious metal that it was even used for buildings to flaunt their superiority, and there were still many battle alchemists in Modus, so other countries feared it. But even such a powerful city, which was supposed to prosper for thousands of years, simply disappeared. The boy did not understand why it happened, but he intended to find out everything. Along with the era, experienced alchemists disappeared, and if the catastrophe repeats, everything could end much worse. Ken realized that all his friends and loved ones could die. The hero's thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a fairy. She said that from the 3 nearest towers of the wise men she had gathered as much information as she could. Zosimos asked if the master was ready to listen to her, and seeing that Ken was nervous, the girls approached him to support him. They smiled warmly and nodded to him. The young man asked the artificial fairy to show him everything, and Zosimos obeyed. A screen appeared before him. He saw terrible scenes of a bloody massacre. Monsters of hatred attacked the city of Modus, tearing the flesh of citizens and killing everyone they saw. People tried to defend themselves, but nothing helped. The heroes did not expect to see these very monsters. Zosimos said she had something else to show the master, opened a new screen, and what the boys saw shocked them. Systems like Zosimos attacked people. Ken could not believe his eyes what those artificial fairies were doing. Zosimos suspected that something was wrong with the central fairy control system, the mother core. Theo asked if the system was okay, and the fairy replied that it worked on its own. The mother core did not affect it because the master created her that way. Ken explained that Zosimos had her own mind. He would never dare to connect her to the general system because his fairy was special among the others. The boy asked if she could find out the cause of the breakdown. Zosimos explained that the mother core is practically a perfect centralized control system. The fairies were extremely important because they ensured safety. Zosim said that the disaster witnessed by Ken was the fault of humans. She nodded to the gentleman to check on the wounded, and just as the young man was about to reproach Zosim for showing death in front of Theo, he saw something terrible. People's bodies began to melt from the inside, and something burst out of them. This creature was the embodiment of hatred. The assistant explained that this is the true nature of these monsters. They grow from the bodies of people who were subjected to some influence of artificial fairies. At that moment, the boy realized the country was destroyed by the most reliable system, and obviously, someone used it against the people. Zosimos told that 500 years ago there was a massacre due to the development of artificial intelligence, and because of the potion's effect on people's bodies, monsters were born. This unexpected truth hit Ken. He needed time to digest everything. Zosimos supported the mistress. She was also stunned by this news. The young man did not understand the difference between those who survived and those who died. Firstly, his fairy worked independently and was not connected to the mother core. Secondly, he was helped by the cradle of rebirth. Thirdly, he had subordinates whom he could fully trust and rely on. He was going over in his mind what could have happened in the laboratory on the day of the disaster. Fortunately, his artifact was hidden deep underground. That is why he ended up in the future. He believed he could stop this nightmare if only he woke up. But he had no time. Ken was reborn 500 years after those terrible events, and the young man shuddered at the very thought that he had failed to start that terrible chain of events. Seeing the boy drowning in emotions, the girls became worried, sat down next to him, and began to convince their friend that he was not to blame for anything. Suddenly a screen appeared before the young man. The artificial fairy reported that it had found something else that might be important for the master. Instantly, his team appeared before him and greeted their boss. Ken froze. He did not expect to see old friends at all. They said that Modus had already ended, so they wanted to record a farewell message to the boss. The guys were going to leave the laboratory and try to stop the catastrophe. At that moment, the monster of hatred broke through to them. The girl gathered her courage and said that since it was their last day, she would take the chance and confess her feelings to Ken. The comrades were shocked. The guy confidently smiled at the camera and thanked the hero for taking him into the team. He promised that he would not let the monsters destroy everything. Another comrade apologized for changing the settings of the resurrection cradle and assured that the boss's illness would be completely cured and would not return. He did not even know how many hundreds of years he would wake up after, and still managed to wish the leader a peaceful rest. The comrades promised to protect his body at the cost of their own lives. The girl confessed once again that she loved Ken. During the farewell, they sincerely wished that he would finally start living for himself. The recording ended. Tears welled up in Phil's eyes. She said that her beloved's friends were good people, and the young man agreed. They were the comrades he had been missing so much. The master ordered Zazima to break the black boxes in every alchemical laboratory and gather all the information about the mother core and monsters from here, and he was most concerned about how a monster of hatred appeared near Sullivan. The artificial fairy obeyed. The hero decisively decided to figure everything out. Many sages and brilliant alchemists lived in the ruined city, but they could not change anything. Only Ken remained, and only he could do something. He felt that he had to seize this chance to start a new life and create a better future. He would not let the catastrophe happen again. Several days passed after Modus's visit. The guys had already gathered in the tavern when the young man said goodbye to the girls. Fio was worried about him and asked if he could manage on his own. Ken assured her that it was just a small investigation. Maya was not going to leave this gentleman alone. He explained that thanks to the artifacts, only he had the combat power of an entire army. The girl had nothing to say. She retreated and promised to gather the knights and scour the outskirts. Having gathered information from Zosima, the young man was able to pinpoint the most suspicious place, the one worth trusting. It was a forest cemetery, and deep within it lay ruins. Dangerous monsters had settled there, and archives recorded that many wizards had died there. Back then they were called alchemists, gems of time, so there was a high probability that they remained from the remnants. Ken was more than sure that this could be connected to the beasts of hatred. Because of this, the hero decided to go there to find out the truth about such monsters. In case they appeared again in the district, the young man asked Maya to gather knights for patrol. The princess and the alchemist climbed to a height and looked down at the gathered knights. Ken did not expect Maya herself to lead them, and the girl replied that if it was for the people, then also for the country. She said that if the gentleman realized it was dangerous there, then he should return. The boy asked her not to worry about him and added that he would manage on his own. The boy was worried that nothing would happen near the city. The princess said she was ready to give her life if necessary. The hero sharply turned to her and said that she must survive because she was dear to him. The girl blossomed with joy. She was scolded, but also told that Ken cared about her. The young man repeated that he did not want the princess to get hurt and said that if there was danger, she would take Fio and run away. Remembering former comrades who gave their lives for the boss's safety, he bitterly asked Maya not to take on too much, and the girl did not understand why he said that. The boy asked if he could complain. The princess did not object. He admitted that he did not want to be alone and did not want any of them to get hurt, and the girl replied that she understood. The boy said he was scared. Ken did not want it to happen again. He had already lost so much and did not want to lose more. Maya said that if the gentleman could live happily and create a wonderful future, his comrades would also be happy. Ken was surprised by this thought and muttered that maybe she was right. The princess came closer and added that he was capable of great deeds but had forgotten about himself, then leaned in and kissed him on the forehead. The girl told the boy to definitely return to them, because even the princess herself kissed him, and at the end asked not to tell Fio about it. Ken entered the forest of graves together with the artificial fairy. He asked if Zosimos had found any signs of life, but she found nothing. An hour had already passed since they entered the forest. The hero felt that the air had become noticeably heavier, and Zosim said that they might encounter broken artificial fairies, so it was better to be careful. Suddenly the boy heard a ringing. It was getting closer and closer. The fairy said it was from movement, and explained that the magic in the air was trembling and creating a sound similar to ringing. The young man suddenly realized that an undead might be standing before them. Zosimos found no signs of life. The fairy suggested it could be the guardian of the ruins, and at that moment, something sliced through the tree trunks right in front of the hero. Magical blades rushed at the hero. He dodged as best he could, but when there were too many, he threw explosives, and after the explosion, a witch appeared right before him, much larger than the young man. She turned out to be the source of that ringing. Ken asked if she could speak. The boy introduced himself as a traveler and alchemist, and the witch began muttering about the Lord of Death, destruction, and the end. The monster spoke threateningly that it would bring destruction and death to everything around. She asked someone where they were. Ken understood nothing. The artificial fairy decided that it was an automatic reaction to the word alchemist and stated that she had conducted a full analysis. Zosim whispered that an artificial fairy was definitely standing before them. The witch's body rapidly began to decompose, and a monster resembling a huge insect crawled out of it. The creature screeched, asked its master where he had been, and said that a new era was already near. Zosimos asked the master if he also saw an artificial fairy before him, but in the shell of a beast of hatred. He agreed. But he rejoiced. He was confident that he had enough strength to defeat the enemy, and mentally addressed his fallen comrades to watch. He was going to show them his true potential.